Malik Carter, valedictorian, Mike Hot, freezes as the principal steps in with scissors for his braids, calling it dress code. The gym locks into silence. His mother stands, phone up while security edges closer, and the PA crackles alive. A hot mic catches a whisper, make an example, boards watching. The live stream chat detonates. Then a DM flashes on screen. Someone in Malik's family tipped them off. The fire alarm screams. The feed glitches to black. Who set him up? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of Franklin High's history classroom, painting the desks in long stripes of gold and shadow. The room smelled faintly of chalk dust and the faint tang of dry erase markers. Outside, the muted hum of traffic blended with the occasional shriek of a gull from the nearby river. Inside, 24 students sat in neat rows, pens tapping, eyes heavy with the last period fatigue that always made the clock seem slower. Mrs. Colleen Hartman stood at the front, a tall woman in her late 40s, with a perfectly pressed navy skirt and a cardigan buttoned to her throat. Her silver hair was swept into a tight bun, and a pearl necklace rested against her collarbone. To the untrained eye, she looked every bit the picture of a seasoned, dedicated educator, organized, articulate, and in control. But the students knew better. Behind her polished appearance was a sharpness, a way of looking at certain kids that carried an unspoken warning. Darius Hill sat 3 rows from the front, notebook open, his pen poised like a soldier waiting for orders. He was a tall, lean 16-year-old with warm brown skin, deep-set eyes, and a head of thick coils that his mother took pride in helping him care for every Sunday evening. Today, those coils caught the sunlight, giving them a copper-brown sheen. Darius was smart, curious, but cautious. He'd learned long ago that in certain classrooms, a wrong move could feel heavier than it should. Mrs. Hartman paced slowly in front of the whiteboard, marker in hand. On the board, in neat block letters, she had written, "The causes of the Civil War." Her voice was clipped but smooth, carrying the air of someone who believed they were always the smartest person in the room. "Darius," she said suddenly, tapping the marker against her palm. "Perhaps you can answer this for the class. What was the primary reason Southern states chose to secede from the Union?" Every head turned toward him. Darius straightened in his seat. He knew the answer, mostly. But in that moment, the pressure of 24 pairs of eyes made his heartbeat quicken. He swallowed, glanced at his notes, and spoke. I think it was about state rights, like they wanted to control their own laws without the federal government interfering." Mrs. Hartman stopped pacing. The corners of her mouth pulled upward, not in approval but in that small, tight smile she wore when someone had walked into a trap. "That," she said, her tone soft but edged with disdain, "is the answer most people give when they haven't done enough research." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Darius opened his mouth to clarify, but Mrs. Hartman was already crossing the room, her heels clicking on the linoleum like a metronome. She stopped beside his desk, towering over him. "You know," she began, voice low but loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Appearances matter. How people present themselves sends a message. And right now, your presentation tells me you aren't serious about learning." Darius frowned, unsure where she was going. "I don't understand."
Mrs. Hartman tilted her head. "Your hair, Darius. It's distracting. It's unkempt. A student who truly values education wouldn't let themselves look this way."
The room seemed to shrink. A ripple of murmurs passed between desks. Darius's face burned. Not from shame, but from the sting of knowing exactly what she was implying. His hair, his pride, his connection to his identity, reduced to a problem in her eyes. He tried to steady his voice. "My hair's fine, ma'am. It's just..." Before he could finish, Mrs. Hartman's hand dipped into the drawer behind her desk. When it emerged, it held a pair of long silver scissors. They glinted under the fluorescent lights, the blades slightly open like a predator's jaws. The class went utterly still. "Let's fix this," she said briskly. Darius's pulse hammered in his ears. "Wait, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, the metallic snip of the scissors opening and closing filling the silence. "Ma'am?" His voice cracked, but he didn't move. Something about her posture, the authority in her stance, made his legs feel rooted to the floor. And then, without warning, her hand shot forward. She gripped a lock of his hair near his temple, and with one swift motion, snip, the sound was sharp, final. A dark curl tumbled onto his desk. A collective gasp rippled through the room. One girl in the back clapped her hand over her mouth. A boy near the window muttered, "Yo, that's messed up," under his breath. Darius stared at the curl, as if it were something fragile and broken. His throat tightened, his vision blurring at the edges. She'd done it. She'd really done it. Mrs. Hartman stepped back, examining her work like a seamstress, inspecting a hem. "Much better," she said coolly. "Now perhaps you can focus on your studies instead of this." He could feel 24 pairs of eyes on him. Some looked shocked, others afraid, but none dared speak loudly. One pair of hands, though, slightly trembling, slid a phone out from under a desk. A tiny red recording light blinked to life. The scissors still hung in Mrs. Hartman's hand, the curl of hair lying between them, like evidence. Darius's jaw clenched. He wanted to speak, to shout, to demand she explain why she thought she had the right, but the words tangled in his throat. He felt stripped, not just of hair, but of dignity. Then, the door creaked open. In the doorway stood Principal Robert Kendall, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and a navy suit. His eyes moved from Darius's desk to the scissors in Mrs. Hartman's hand, then back to Darius's face. The room froze. Even the air felt heavier. "Mrs. Hartman," he said slowly, his voice low and measured, "what exactly is going on here?" For a moment, the air in the classroom held its breath. Principal Kendall's eyes flicked once more to the scissors, then to the small curl of hair lying on Darius's desk. The silence was so complete that the faint hum of the fluorescent lights seemed suddenly loud. Mrs. Hartman lowered the scissors to her side but didn't release her grip on them. "It's a misunderstanding," she began, her voice tight. "We were simply—" "Enough," Kendall said sharply, his voice slicing through the tension. "Darius, come with me." Darius rose slowly, the legs of his chair scraping the linoleum. Every step toward the door felt heavy, as if the hallway itself might collapse under the weight of what had just happened. He didn't look at his classmates, but he could feel their eyes following him. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the room erupted into a low buzz. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. She cut it. "That's insane. I got the whole thing on video." In the corner, a girl with braids and oversized hoop earrings leaned toward her friend, her voice low but urgent. "Send me that clip. I'm posting it right now." By the time the second hand on the hallway clock completed its slow sweep, the footage was already bouncing from phone to phone. Shaky but clear enough, it captured Mrs. Hartman's hand holding the scissors, the swift snip, the curl of hair falling. Each replay sparked another round of gasps or muttered curses. Darius trailed Principal Kendall down the hallway. The sounds of lockers slamming and chatter felt distant, muffled under the rush of blood in his ears. His stomach churned, not just from humiliation, but from a gnawing uncertainty about what came next. When they reached the nurse's office, Kendall spoke without looking back. "Sit down, Darius. The nurse will check on you." The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gestured to the cot. "Just relax here for a bit, sweetheart." She didn't ask questions, at least not out loud, but her glance at the uneven patch of hair spoke volume. While Darius sat in silence, the school hallways became a web of whispers and screams. By the time the bell rang for dismissal, the video had already appeared on 3 Instagram stories, 2 Twitter threads, and 1 TikTok account with over 20,000 followers. "Justice for Darius" appeared for the first time at 3. By 3:15, it was trending in the local area. Mrs. Hartman, meanwhile, stood rigid in Principal Kendall's office, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The blinds were drawn, cutting off the view of curious students passing by. "I demand to know why you're making a spectacle of this," she said, her voice steady but defensive. "This is my classroom. I maintain discipline as I see fit." "Cutting a student's hair is not discipline," Kendall replied evenly, though his jaw was tight. "It's an assault on personal dignity and, frankly, on common sense." Hartman bristled. "That boy has been disrespectful for weeks. I was trying to teach him the importance of presenting himself appropriately. You don't get to define appropriate in a way that targets a student's cultural identity." Kendall cut in, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're twisting my intentions." Kendall leaned back in his chair. "Intentions aren't the point. Impact is. And right now the impact is going viral." As if on cue, his office phone rang. He ignored it. Back in the nurse's office, Darius's phone vibrated relentlessly in his backpack. When he finally pulled it out, the lock screen was a flood of notifications. "Bro, is that you?" This is blowing up, man. Your mom's gonna flip. The thought of his mother, Vanessa Hill, ignited a fresh wave of anxiety. She was fiercely protective, the kind of woman who didn't just show up for a parent-teacher conference. She came armed with questions, documentation, and a voice that carried down hallways. She was also the one who had taught him to take pride in his hair, to see it as a reflection of his heritage and resilience. The image of her seeing that video, seeing him lose a piece of that without his consent, made his chest tighten. The nurse offered him a bottle of water. "Want me to call your mom?" she asked gently. He hesitated. She probably already knows. And he was right. 2 miles away, Vanessa Hill sat in her parked car outside the grocery store, her phone in hand. She had just finished work and was scrolling through her feed when the video appeared, tagged to her by 3 different people. She watched it once in silence, jaw tightening with each second. She watched it again, slower, pausing at the frame where Mrs. Hartman's hand gripped her son's hair. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she pressed record. "This is Vanessa Hill," she said into the camera, her voice low but sharp as glass. "And I'm on my way to Franklin High School, right now. Whoever thought they could put their hands on my child, cut my child's hair, will explain it to my face. And I'll be recording every word." By the time the dismissal bell echoed through the school halls, the whispers had turned into a steady undercurrent of stares and murmurs. Students streamed out of classrooms, heads bent over their phones, showing the clip to anyone who hadn't seen it yet. A cluster of seniors near the front doors debated in hushed tones. "She's gonna get fired for this," one said. "Nah," another replied. "They'll just sweep it under the rug like always." "Not this time. His mom's on her way." In the main office, Kendall rubbed his temples. "Mrs. Hartman, you need to wait in here until we sort this out. I have another class to teach," she snapped. "You won't be teaching until further notice," Kendall said flatly. From the hallway came the sound of hurried footsteps. The office door flew open, with a force that rattled the blinds. Vanessa Hill stepped inside, phone held high. Already recording. Her work blazer was still on, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes locked on Mrs. Hartman like a storm, zeroing in on landfall. She didn't even glance at Kendall. Her voice cut through the room. "Which one of you," she demanded, "thinks they can put their hands on my son?" Vanessa didn't lower the phone. The red recording dot hovered in the middle of her screen, like a sightline. "Which one of you thinks they can put their hands on my son?" Her voice didn't waver. It cut clean as glass. Principal Kendall rose from behind his desk, palms open. "Miss Hill, let's take a breath. We're addressing the situation." Vanessa's gaze never left Mrs. Hartman. "You're addressing it. My son's hair is on a desk." She angled the camera, capturing Hartman from head to heels. "Say your name for the record." Hartman's chin lifted. "Mrs. Colleen Hartman. I'm Darius's history teacher." And the person who cut his hair, Vanessa said, steady and surgical, on camera, in front of children. The secretary in the corner, who'd been pretending to sort papers, froze. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then to Kendall. The room shifted. The quiet solidarity adults sometimes give one another evaporated. Now there was a lens, and lenses made liars nervous. "Miss Hill," Kendall said, gentler, "Darius is with the nurse. He's okay. Let's sit." "No. We're going to stand," Vanessa said, "because I have stood for long enough in districts that push things into carpet corners. We'll stand and speak plainly." She took a short breath, kept the camera level. "Explain to me, Mrs. Hartman, why you touched my son's head. Use complete sentences." Hartman's fingers knotted loosely at her waist, the pearls at her throat unmoving. "The classroom was becoming chaotic," she said. "I needed to re-establish order. Darius was not focused on academic content." Vanessa tilted her head. "Academic content or your comfort?" "My classroom expectations," Hartman replied. "I maintain them equally. Every student understands they must present themselves appropriately." The secretary glanced again at the phone. Should I call the district office?" she whispered to Kendall. "Not yet," he murmured, but his eyes stayed on the red dot. Vanessa's lips parted in disbelief. "Appropriately." She shifted the camera, framing Hartman with the district's motto on the wall behind her. "Every child, every day. Define appropriately for the record." Hartman inhaled with the poise of someone used to panels and parent nights. "Neat, unobtrusive, professional. We prepare students for the world, Miss Hill." "The world," Vanessa repeated. the word bitter on her tongue, where people like my son are punished for existing in their own features. That's not what I said, Hartman answered quickly. This is not about race. It's about standards. We had an important lecture on the causes of the Civil War. And, oh, the Civil War, Vanessa said softly, eyes narrowing. And in a lesson about the nation's sin, you reenacted a smaller version of it. Is that what you're telling me? Kendall stepped in. Ms. Hill, I'm initiating an investigation. Mrs. Hartman will be placed on.
Vanessa cut him a look. Placed on what? Administrative adjectives? While my son learns that his body is public property? She returned to Hartman. Say it clearly. Why his hair?
His hairstyle is distracting, Hartman said, choosing the word with care. It draws attention. It communicates a lack of seriousness about the subject matter. Vanessa blinked, once, as if steadying a lens. His hair communicates knowledge now? She took a half step closer, not looming, but unshakable. My son studied last night, with me at the kitchen table. He can cite primary sources better than some interns, and you looked at his hair and saw a problem to fix. The secretary's voice floated timidly across the room. Miss Hill, maybe we can fill out an incident form. Form later, Vanessa said. Truth now. Kendall cleared his throat. Mrs. Hartman, please sit down. I'm fine standing, Hartman replied. Her tone softened but carried that teacher's cadence that sorted children into boxes. Miss Hill, many parents appreciate boundaries. They thank me for setting the tone, helping their children understand expectations of polite society. Vanessa's eyebrows rose. Polite society, she repeated, not quite a laugh. Do you hear yourself? Hartman's eyes flicked, just once, to the phone. You're recording in a private office. That's not permitted without consent. Vanessa turned the camera deliberately toward a poster behind Kendall's desk. Visitors must check in. All safety policies posted in lobby. She panned to Kendall. Does the policy forbid me from recording the person who cut my child's hair? Kendall hesitated. We encourage privacy for all parties during an investigation. Encourage, Vanessa said. Not enforce. She brought the phone back to Hartman. I'm documenting harm. If that's uncomfortable, good. Growth requires discomfort. A vibration hummed on the secretary's desk. She glanced at the screen and swallowed. The front office phones are ringing non-stop. Parents are calling. Vanessa's words were quiet, precise. Because the entire hallway watched my son get shamed, and now the city is watching you try to dress it up as tone. Hartman folded her hands, then unfolded them. I asked Darius a question. He gave an unserious answer. Vanessa's jaw flexed. He said states' rights, didn't he? Because he's been taught to listen for how language hides rot. And before he could elaborate, you cut his hair. Hartman's cheeks pinked. Ms. Hill, you weren't there. Vanessa's voice thinned into something dangerous and calm. I'm here now. For the first time, Hartman's veneer slipped. I have had students of all backgrounds thrive in my classroom. I mentored the multicultural club. Vanessa's laugh came sharp. The brochure verbs won't save you. Kendall lifted a hand. We will take statements. We will review video. Mrs. Hartman, please wait in the conference room. Miss Hill, I'll have the nurse bring Darius here. No, Vanessa said. You'll have me go to him. She angled the phone to catch the office door, the corridor beyond. Her voice softened at the edges. He shouldn't be the one walking into a room with the person who cut him. Hartman exhaled, exasperated. No one cut him. It was a lock of hair. Let's not be dramatic. Vanessa's eyes went flat. We use words precisely in this family. You cut part of his body without consent. Silence pressed in, the secretary's pen still. A boy's voice drifted faintly from the corridor, filtered through the office door. It's at 30,000 views. My cousin in Atlanta reposted it. Another voice. Justice for Darius is everywhere. The secretary stood, bustling toward the blinds, as if closing them could shut out the rising noise. She tugged the slats, and that's when Vanessa noticed the laminated sheet, pinned on the inside of the blind's frame, half hidden. Dress code update. Pilot language. Week of homecoming. Clear bullet points crowded the page. One line, in a smaller font, read, no hairstyles that draw undue attention. Distracting. Beneath it, in parentheses, includes unnatural colors, excessive volume, designs shaved into hair. Vanessa moved closer, the phone catching it. What's this pilot language? Kendall followed her gaze and paled. That's a draft. Not approved. It was for internal discussion. Internal? Vanessa said softly. Funny. It's posted in your office, and it uses distracting as if that word hasn't been used to police black children since the first bell was rung. Hartman seized on the page like a life raft. We're aligning expectations. The district is reviewing standards so students are prepared for college and careers. Our superintendent. Kendall's voice sharpened. Colleen. It was the first time he'd used her first name. He stepped between Hartman and the poster, lips pressed thin. That draft should have been removed. The secretary swallowed. I thought we needed it handy for the board visit. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Kendall. Board visit? He looked like a man whose suit had suddenly become too tight. We have trustees observing classrooms this week. Optics matter. Optics. Vanessa repeated. So my son's hair was an optic to be managed. Hartman lifted her chin. You're twisting. No, Vanessa said, voice iron. You are. You trimmed his dignity and called it preparation. You pathologized a curl pattern and packaged it as neutral. A beat passed. Then another. The door cracked open, and a guidance counselor, Mr. Alvarez, poked his head in. He took in the tableau, Vanessa filming, Hartman rigid, Kendall brittle. Mrs. Hartman, he said carefully. Some students are gathering near the main stairs. They're chanting. We might need extra staff. Chanting what? Kendall asked. Keep your hands off our hair, Alvarez said, and Darius's name. Hartman's mouth tightened. So this is a circus now. It's a demand, Vanessa said. And they learned it from you. Kendall rubbed his forehead. Mr. Alvarez, please coordinate with security to keep hallways clear. No one confronts the students. Understood. Alvarez nodded and disappeared. Vanessa lowered the phone an inch, just enough to let her breath steady. When she raised it again, her voice had no tremor. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to document that my son was assaulted. You're going to notify the district. You're going to ensure he doesn't have to step back into that room with her. And you're going to say out loud that what happened to him was wrong. Kendall looked at the phone, then at Vanessa. Something in his posture shifted. Less principle, more man trying to find the right side of history in real time. What happened to Darius was wrong, he said quietly. We will take immediate steps. Hartman spoke over him. You're making policy on the basis of a parent's temper. Vanessa's smile was blade thin. I've been making policy over kitchen tables my whole life. The policy is dignity. And consequences, Kendall added, almost to himself. The secretary who had been holding her breath released it. I'll call the superintendent's office. Vanessa nodded. Thank you. She took a step toward the door. I'm going to my son. She had her hand on the knob when Hartman's voice followed, brittle and quiet. Miss Hill. Vanessa paused without turning. What? Hartman's tone shifted, measured, almost plaintive. You are overreacting, because social media amplifies everything. 100 little things become a crisis. I've seen boys like your son get derailed by attitude and appearance. I did not harm him. I redirected him. Vanessa turned back slowly, eyes steady as a camera on a tripod. You redirected him, with scissors. Hartman met the lens head on. For the first time, she smiled. Small, controlled. A smile she used when she believed she had said something unimpeachable. I did it for his own good. The sentence hung in the office like a dropped match. I did it for his own good. Vanessa didn't answer. She only raised the phone a fraction higher, the red light steady, and stepped into the hallway. Word traveled ahead of her, carried by the clip and its chorus of gasps. Down the corridor, students clustered in islands around their screens, blue light washing their faces. Someone had slowed the footage frame by frame. Miss Hartman's hand on Darius's head, the quick glint of steel, the curl drifting like a fallen note. A caption, white text on black. He answered a question wrong. She cut his hair. The audio was all breath and shock. By the main stairwell, a freshman in a track jacket kept hitting replay. My cousin just posted it on TikTok, he told a girl who was crying without realizing it. He's got followers, like big followers. Their eyes went to the door of the nurse's office as Vanessa approached, and in that gaze was something more than curiosity. It was witness. Inside, Darius sat on the cot with the water bottle, untouched. He looked up when the door opened, and straightened, a reflex trained from years of watching adults read his posture for intent. Vanessa kept the camera down now, off her son's face. Her voice softened without losing its edge. I'm right here, she said. Darius nodded. He touched the uneven spot near his temple and winced at nothing but memory. Mom. Everybody saw. I saw too, she said, and it meant I will not let this evaporate by evening. She glanced at the nurse, who stood 3 steps away, hands folded, eyes kind in a way that didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed with gauze. We'll be leaving soon, Vanessa added. But first documentation.
Yes.
The nurse nodded. I'll file an incident report. Do you want me to take a photo for the file? Vanessa exhaled. Yes. Then send me a copy. By 3:31 p.m., the clip was on 3 platforms. By 3:35 p.m., it found its way into a group chat named River City Seniors 2025. At 3:41 p.m., a local community page on Facebook posted a screenshot with a question. Is this Franklin High? Anyone know this teacher? At 3:43 p.m., a youth organizer named Kiara, who had led a school supply drive the past summer, retweeted it with a caption that cut clean. We said our hair is not a dress code violation. They answered with scissors. Justice for Darius. The algorithm did what it always does when something feels both intimate and public. It leaned in. Views multiplied like heartbeats. A reporter from the River City Ledger emailed the district's media address at 3:52 p.m. 2 minutes later, she called the front office, then texted a parent she knew from previous coverage of school board meetings. Do you have contact info for the family? The text read. By 4:01 p.m., an activist lawyer's account threaded a primer on hair discrimination, citing state statutes and case law. People who had never heard of the Crown Act learned it had been adopted in some states, and not others. Comments beneath spilled stories, girls sent home for braids, boys written up for fades, the word distracting like a stamp over childhood. At 4:07 p.m., a second angle surfaced. A student near the back of the room had filmed too, and in that clip, Mrs. Hartman's face was visible at the moment the scissors closed. There was no panic, no accident, only purpose, and a small exhale after, as if a task had been completed. 2 angles, someone tweeted. They'll try to say it's edited. It isn't. Meanwhile, the district's group text for administrators grew frantic. Has anyone spoken to the teacher? Do not comment. Direct media to communications. We need a statement by 5. Is the boy okay? Who posted that dress code draft in Kendall's office? The last text received no reply. In the conference room, Mrs. Hartman sat with her arms crossed, listening to her own heartbeat. She tried to stack her thoughts into the old orderly piles. Standards, civility, the belief that if she stayed composed long enough she could outlast the storm. But even behind the closed door she heard the chant, low at first, and then swelling. Keep your hands off our hair. The floor seemed to carry the sound into the soles of her shoes. At 4:19 p.m., a popular local radio host added the clip to his feed. This is Franklin High. This is our city, he wrote. We've got questions. His video reaction, filmed in his car, was raw and controlled. He didn't curse. He didn't need to. The school board's private email chain ignited. Trustees typed in the clipped voices of people who know each sentence could leak. We must protect the district from liability. We must protect staff morale. We must protect children. The word protect became a verb pointed in 3 different directions. Then the unexpected twist arrived in public view, not as a rumor but as a PDF. At 4:32 p.m., an anonymous Twitter account called IRC Transparency posted scanned minutes from a recent Culture and Climate Subcommittee meeting. The header bore the district logo. The attendee list included 2 trustees, an assistant superintendent, 1 parent rep, and there she was in clean sans serif, Mrs. Colleen Hartman, teacher chair. Down in the bullet points, among bell schedule adjustments and hall pass colors, sat a line item, draft pilot language, discouraging distracting hairstyles, align with college career readiness. Beside it, lead, Hartman, review with principals. The tweet was blunt. She didn't just enforce it, she wrote it. Comments detonated. The minutes were 2 weeks old. Kendall saw the post in real time. He felt heat rise under his collar. He typed a message to the superintendent, deleted it, typed again. We need legal. His screen lit with new messages before he hit send. Board wants an emergency session. 6 p.m. Virtual. No staff statements. Do not discipline the teacher without HR present. Where is the family? The fact that the family was a person, 2 people, a mother and son, kept getting flattened into a line item. Kendall hated that most of all. At 4:45 p.m., a former student of Hartman's replied to IRC Transparency. with a scanned letter she had written 3 years prior to the principal, Kendall himself, complaining that Hartman had made her remove a scarf she wore during finals week while growing out a protective style. The subject line, request for safe accommodation. Below it, a polite, precise paragraph. The screenshot ended before the response. Kendall remembered the letter. He remembered he had forwarded it to HR and been told they'd circle back. He remembered suddenly, and with shame, that no one ever had. Vanessa and Darius walked out through the side door to avoid the crowd. The fall air tasted like metal. A local TV van screeched to a stop near the curb. A woman with a perfect bob and a microphone jogged toward them, producer trailing. Miss Hill? I'm Leah from Channel 7. We'd like— Not now, Vanessa said, the politeness in her voice forged rather than born. I'm taking my son home. But she didn't rush. She looked the reporter in the eye and added, you can film the outside of the school as long as you blur my child's face. It wasn't a request. Leah nodded, surprised at being given any condition rather than a slammed door. We'll be in touch. A block away, Kiara live-streamed from the sidewalk. We are here because a teacher cut a student's hair and called it education. She told her audience. We are here because rules invented to humiliate then justified as standards are still rules. Tonight, we're gathering outside the school board office. No violence, no property damage, just bodies and voices. Comments sped up the screen like confetti. I'm coming. What time? Make signs. Call me if you need water. In the quiet of the car, Darius pressed his forehead to the cool glass. The world outside smeared and sharpened between streetlights. I don't want to be a thing, he said, searching for a word that didn't make him a headline. Vanessa adjusted the rearview mirror and found his eyes. You are not a thing, she said. You are a person. Something happened to. We will decide what to do with that. No one else. She paused, then added, but we won't let them tell the story without us in it. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. He was tired of the sound of other people's shock. At home, the porch light flicked on automatically, as if the house had been holding its breath too. On the kitchen table, a bowl of apples sat beside a stack of mail, and a half-finished crossword. Ordinary things laid out in ordinary light. Vanessa set her phone beside the mail, still recording in her mind even when the lens wasn't open. Tea? She asked. Please, Darius said, surprising both of them with the word. They were silent, listening to the kettle, when the district's official statement dropped at 5:28 p.m., on a white background, with a blue logo. We are aware of a disturbing video circulating on social media. We are investigating. We take the dignity of all students seriously. We ask the community for patience. As we gather facts, the last sentence landed like a brick. We ask the community for patience. Leah from Channel 7 read the statement on air, then cut to the second angle footage. Her eyes at the end were not neutral. We'll continue to follow this, she said. And it sounded like a promise, not a tease. The school board chair texted the superintendent. Can we say she's been placed on leave? The superintendent replied, HR wants to interview first. Don't get ahead of process. The chair process is behind headlines. By 5:47 p.m., a national account with 1 million followers amplified the clip. Imagine your kid answers a question wrong, and a teacher cuts their hair. In 2025, we keep saying never again, like we mean it. In the comments, a familiar pattern emerged. Some demanded accountability. Others insisted everyone wait for the full context. A few implied boys like Darius invite discipline by posture alone, but the core held most people saw the cut for what it was. Vanessa's phone, face down beside the apples, buzzed against the wood. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then again, insistent. Darius glanced at the screen and read the caller ID aloud, shaping the unfamiliar name carefully. Elias Monroe. Vanessa frowned. Who? He turned the phone so she could see. Elias Monroe, civil rights attorney. The previewed text below the missed call read, saw the video. Pro bono if you want it. The phone buzzed once more, this time a call, not a text. Vanessa stared at the screen, at the name of a stranger who sounded like he had already decided to stand in the doorway with them. She let it ring twice. A third time, the kitchen clock ticking between it. Then she tapped accept and lifted it to her ear. Ms. Hill? A calm voice said. My name is Elias. I believe your case could change policy. Not just at Franklin High. If you'll let me, I'd like to help. Elias Monroe didn't waste time with pleasantries. By the next morning he was in Vanessa's living room, with a yellow legal pad balanced on his knee, and a black fountain pen scratching across the top line. His voice was calm, even slow, but it carried the precision of someone who knew exactly which details might shift a case from outrage to precedent. "I've seen this before," he said, flipping the pad to a fresh page. "Not this exact act, but the pattern. Small physical gestures meant to correct a child. They call it guidance. The law calls it battery." Vanessa sat forward on the couch, elbows on her knees. Darius sat beside her, silent but listening. Elias glanced at him now and then, not to study him like an exhibit, but to remind the boy he was in the room, and not invisible. "What I need," Elias continued, "is history. Has Mrs. Hartman had issues before? Any rumors even? People rarely do something like this for the first time in front of a camera." Vanessa thought back to the snippets she'd heard over the years. "There's been talk," parents whisper, but she shrugged. "Whispering doesn't change policy." Elias smiled faintly. "That's why we dig." By noon, he had requested personnel records from the district under a state transparency statute. By 2, he had a list of names, students who had been in Hartman's classes over the last decade. Some names he recognized from community events, others came through friends of friends, people who had already seen the viral clip and were waiting for someone to ask them. The first call came from a young man named Jamal, now in college. "She always had a way," he said over the phone, not yelling, just looking at you like you were out of place. "One time she sent me to the office because my hoodie had too bold of a graphic. It was a photo of James Baldwin. What's this to be?" A second call came from Aisha, a nursing student. She'd make little comments about wild hair. "One time I wore Bantu knots to class, and she said I looked ready for a festival. I didn't even know what she meant, but the other kids laughed. She laughed too." Elias filled page after page. Many stories were not dramatic enough for headlines, but together they formed a lattice of bias, small enough to be denied individually, heavy enough to crush when stacked. By late afternoon, the pattern was clear. Black students were more likely to be written up for appearance violations in Hartman's classes than in others. Some were told to remove scarves. Some were told their hairstyles were not professional. The phrasing varied, but the root was constant. At 5:12 p.m., an email landed in Elias's inbox from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Regarding Mrs. Hartman, confidential." The body was only one sentence. "I think you should see this." The attachment was a scanned complaint from 7 years ago, filed by the parent of a 9th-grade girl named Simone Carter. The form was faded, but the handwriting in the narrative section was clear. "My daughter was singled out in front of the class. Miss Hartman told her hair was too distracting for a presentation and said she would fix it. She applied a bleaching agent to one section of Simone's braids without permission. My daughter came home crying. I demand action." Elias leaned back in his chair. There was a note in the margin, written in a different hand. "Resolved, student transferred to another class at parent's request. No further action needed." He printed it immediately. That night, Vanessa read the complaint twice, then a third time. "They knew," she whispered. 7 years ago. They knew." Elias nodded, and they moved the child instead of the problem. The next morning, he tracked down Simone Carter. She was 24 now, working in a downtown design studio. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop, her tone clipped but curious. When Simone arrived, she wore her hair in thick waist-length twists streaked with copper. She slid into the booth across from Elias and Vanessa, her eyes guarded. "You're here about Hartman," she said without preamble. Elias placed the printed complaint on the table. "Do you remember this?" Simone glanced at it, then laughed without humor. "Remember? I can still smell the bleach if I think about it. She pulled me aside before I had to give my project. Said the beads at the ends of my braids would distract the audience. I told her they were part of my style. She said, not in this room. Then she pulled out this little bottle from her desk drawer. Said she just wanted to lighten one strand, so it wouldn't catch the light. I told her no. She grabbed one braid and did it anyway." Vanessa's jaw tightened, in front of the class. "Oh yeah," Simone said. Kids laughed. Not because they thought it was funny, because they didn't know what else to do. "Did it burn?" Elias asked. "Not bad. But it stank. And it made me feel." She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Small. Like she was erasing me one piece at a time." Elias slid the complaint toward her. The district marked it as resolved. Simone's eyebrows lifted. "Resolved?" They offered to move me to another history class. My mom said yes because she didn't want to fight a whole system. But nothing happened to Hartman. I saw her in the hallway every day. Vanessa shook her head. 7 years. She's been doing this for 7 years. Longer, Simone said. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small beat-up composition notebook. I kept this. It's from that year. I wrote down everything. Dates. What she said. My mom said I might need it someday. She flipped through the pages until she found one lined with careful teenage handwriting. January 12. She asked if my hair was real, said she thought I was wearing extensions for attention. Vanessa took a slow breath. Simone, would you be willing to go on record to say this publicly? Simone closed the notebook and placed it on the table between them. I'll do more than that. I still have the braid she bleached. My mom made me cut it out and keep it as proof. I put it in a plastic bag. It's in my closet. Elias's pen stilled over the legal pad. You're saying you have physical evidence? Simone nodded. It's not pretty to look at, but it's mine. And it's proof she's been targeting kids like me for a long time. The coffee shop noise faded under the weight of her words. Outside, traffic hummed along the street, oblivious to the fact that inside, a thread from 7 years ago had just been pulled, and the fabric of Hartman's career might unravel. Vanessa leaned forward. Simone, can you bring it to me? Simone smiled, not warmly, but with the satisfaction of someone finally being heard. I'll bring it tomorrow, in the same bag it's been in since that day. And as she spoke, a flash of copper glinted in her twists, a reminder that even bleach couldn't strip away everything. Simone's promise, I'll bring it tomorrow, in the same bag it's been in since that day, hung in Vanessa's mind like a lit fuse. While she and Darius tried to sleep, while the city refreshed their feeds, the district turned off the lobby lights and funneled itself into a conference room with no windows. At 8:04 p.m., a laminated closed session, confidential placard appeared on the door of the River City Unified Boardroom. Inside, the long oak table reflected the harsh ceiling lights, a gleaming runway for urgent whispers. The board chair, Marjorie Lake, tapped a manicured finger against a pristine agenda. The words potential litigation and personnel sat inside neat black boxes. The chaos outside the building was reduced to 2 lines of typography. Let's begin, Marjorie said. For the record, trustees present Pierce, Havel, Ortega, Choate. Council present. Ms. Desai, Superintendent, Dr. Cho. Communications, Mr. Fry. HR, Ms. Weller. Principal Kendall, remote. Kendall's face flickered onto the end screen, the blue light making him look older than the clock allowed. He didn't bother with pleasantries. They're still outside, he said. Students, parents, signs. Communications Director Nolan Fry slid a folder forward, voice quick and frictionless. Our statement is holding. We are investigating. Respect for dignity, patience, gathering facts. I recommend no further comment. Trustee Devon Pierce, the youngest at the table by a decade, leaned back, one ankle balanced on his knee. That statement reads like we're asking people to stop caring, he said. The video is not ambiguous. General Counsel Priya Desai spoke without looking up. Ambiguity is our friend until we know the full scope of liability. Marjorie's smile was polite, the kind she had learned at donor dinners. Let's stay focused, please. Dr. Cho, Superintendent Alan Cho, adjusted his tie. We have an insurance retention of $500,000 before our carrier kicks in. If this becomes a class action, we could be exposed. Also, federal Title VI attention is not out of the question. HR Director Jan Weller folded her hands. We shouldn't say discipline yet. Process requires an interview with the employee. The union will object to premature conclusions. Premature, Devon repeated, testing the word as if it might break in his mouth. A teacher used scissors on a child's head. Marjorie cleared her throat. Mrs. Hartman has been a high-performing educator for 23 years. Let's not reduce her career to a single lapse in judgment. Reduce? Kendall said through the speaker. The word came out more tired than angry. Parents tried to raise concerns before. We reduced those too. Priya flicked a glance his way. Principal, please keep to documented matters. Kendall swallowed. Document. A student named Simone Carter filed a complaint 7 years ago. I forwarded it to HR. Nothing happened. Jean's jaw tightened. We offered a class transfer. The parent accepted. Devon stared at the tabletop, tracing the grain with his eyes. He could hear the chant through the HEFAC, distant and steady. Keep your hands off our hair. Marjorie flipped to the second page. We also must consider political realities. The bond measure is on the ballot next month. If we look chaotic, we jeopardize construction at 3 elementary sites. Nolan nodded, sliding a color printout into the center. A pie chart, clean slices labeled facilities, technology, safety upgrades. Messaging must be calm. One educator's misdirection rather than systemic failure. People don't invest when they smell collapse. Devon looked up. People don't invest when they smell dishonesty. Priya cut in, efficient as a metronome. Here's the legal path. Place Hartman on paid administrative leave, pending investigation. Retain an outside investigator with school law experience. Restrict all staff from public comment. Emphasize due process. In parallel, prepare for the possibility of a demand letter from the family's counsel. Already arrived, Kendall said. Addie. Elias Monroe called the main line and emailed. Pro bono, he said. Nolan's pen hovered. Monroe. He's got media savvy. Marjorie smiled again. Thinner. We have resources too. We can shape the narrative, if we move quickly and keep our internal messaging consistent. Shape the narrative, Devon said, the phrase landing flat. There's also an internal narrative. Our own emails. Our drafts. That pilot language sheet. In Kendall's office. It bears Hartman's name. And mine by proximity. If that's public, it doesn't look like a misstep. It looks like a plan. Priya interlaced her fingers. Drafts are not adopted policy. Drafts reveal intent, Devon said quietly. A pause. The air conditioner clicked on like stage direction. Jean cleared her throat, reaching for a manila envelope. We've had a spike in appearance-based write-ups in Hartman's classes over the last 5 years. Disproportional to others. Nothing illegal per se, dress codes are permissible. But Stop using that word, Devon said, sharper than he intended. We've built a thesaurus around harm. Marjorie's gaze cooled. Mr. Pierce, you campaigned on fiscal prudence. Keep in mind what harm looks like when the state auditor reviews our reserve after we spend it settling. Devon almost laughed, a small exhale without humor. I campaigned on transparency too. Nolan opened his hands. Here's a framing option. In a moment of poor judgment, a veteran teacher attempted a non-punitive correction and unintentionally caused distress. The district is committed to restorative dialogue. The word unintentionally is key. It blunts malice. Non-punitive, Kendall said. She had scissors. Priya looked down the table. Voice even. Words matter. And every adjective costs or saves dollars. A phone vibrated against wood. Marjorie glanced at the screen and turned it face down. Board members, are we aligned on the immediate steps? Leave investigation, message discipline. Havenchoet nodded, eyes already on the clock. Ortega hesitated, then nodded as well. Devon didn't move. Mr. Pierce? Marjorie prompted. He reached for his water, then put it back untouched. We're about to label a violation of a child's body a misunderstanding. An alleged violation, Priya corrected with reflex precision. Alleged in front of 2 cameras, Devon said. Alleged with a paper trail. The door opened a crack, and a secretary slipped inside, cheeks flushed from the October air. Sorry, she whispered. Press is outside. Someone said Channel 7 has a live truck. Nolan smoothed his tie. I'll handle the press hold. Do not speak to them, Priya said without looking up. Not one improvisational syllable. The door closed. The room flattened again. Marjorie gathered her pages in a neat stack and aligned them with the table edge. HR will inform Mrs. Hartman of leave status tonight. Dr. Cho, please secure an investigator by morning. Mr. Fry, prepare Q&A for likely questions. Is the district racist? Do you support the Crown Act? Did you ignore prior complaints? Answer. We support all applicable laws. We investigate all concerns. We value every child. Devon let out the softest breath. We keep saying words like value as if the kids can feel them. Marjorie looked at him for a long moment, as if memorizing his dissent for later use. Meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped, papers slid into briefcases. The door opened to the corridor where fluorescent lights hummed their indifferent song. One by one, trustees filed out with their faces arranged for neutral weather. Devon lingered. He stayed until the room was empty, except for the echo of strategy. On the screen, Kendall was still connected, not realizing no one had killed the call. He sat in his office, shoulders rounded. Kendall, Devon said quietly. Were there other complaints I should know about? Kendall looked up, startled, then resigned. Not just complaints. Patterns. Teachers in certain corridors write up the same kids, for the same things, using the same words. We say we'll circle back like it's absolution. Devon nodded once. Thank you. After the room finally darkened, Devon stepped into the hallway and turned right. Not toward the exit, but toward the copy room. He closed the door, pulled his phone from his pocket, and scrolled to an email thread he had ignored out of complicity and convenience. Subject: culture and climate. Hair language. The names in the thread glowed, like a roster of people who might sleep fine tonight, if no one made them look. He read the messages again. We need to curb distracting styles before the board visit. Use college and career language. It polls well. Hartman can pilot in her classes. Low-risk group. Keep it internal until after bond. Words that made his chest tighten. Typed by colleagues who would call their kids to say goodnight and tell them to be kind. He forwarded the thread to his personal account. He stared at his own name in the CC line and felt a rise of heat. Shame and something like resolve fused together. The copy room's printer warmed, whirred, and began to spit pages face down into the tray. Devon gathered them, squared the stack against the tabletop, and slid it into a plain envelope. On the flap he wrote a name not from the district directory, but from the evening news chyron. Leah Benton, Channel C. He hesitated, then opened his phone again. Another name tugged at him. River City Ledger. He typed a new email. Subject line plain as a confession. You should see this. He attached the PDF. His thumb hovered over send and, for the first time that night, he felt the air move like weather changing. He pressed. Across town, in a newsroom lit by monitors and coffee, Leah glanced at her inbox between segments. The subject line blinked at her. She clicked, skimmed, stopped, backtracked, read again, slower. In the drafting booth, her producer watched her face drain to focus. Leah? He said. She didn't answer. She was already forwarding the file to legal, already flagging the segment producer, already hearing the shape of the words she would have to say without trembling. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, with a text from an unknown number. If you want more, call me. I'm a trustee. No names yet. Leah raised the mic to her lips, eyes on the red tally light. Breaking tonight, she began, voice steady. Confidential emails suggest district officials considered labeling the haircutting incident a misunderstanding, while piloting stricter appearance standards, prior complaints included. We've obtained the documents. Her producer held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The tally light went red, and in living rooms and kitchens and cars, idling at curbs, phones lit with push notifications. Leaked emails showed district news. The leaks hit like thunder the night before, and by dawn the city woke into weather that felt charged. Phones glowed on nightstands. Threads piled under the words, we knew and they knew. By first period the halls of Franklin High pulsed, not with the shuffle of tardy slips, but with a quiet choreography. Eyes lifted, heads nodding, messages slipping from screen to screen like cues in a play. Someone had spun a fresh banner out of the rage. Cut the policy, not the kids. It tied itself around the older tag. Justice for Darius, and climbed. An account that posted local bus schedules turned into a megaphone overnight. Walkout third period. Meet at the football field. Silent sit-in. Bring signs. No fights. Keep filming. Darius saw the plan forming long before he wanted to. He moved through the corridor with his hoodie up, Vanessa's hand light on his shoulder, as if touch alone could soften the edges of attention. The gentle char on his scalp where the hair had been cut felt like a bruise he couldn't cover, and every look pressed on it. You don't have to be in the middle of it, Vanessa murmured as they passed a row of lockers, where someone had taped a printout of the leaked email subject lines. Students paused to read, whispering the words as if they were a spell pilot language. Curb. Distracting. You can walk out with them or not at all. We're not proving anything to anyone. I don't know what I am in the middle of, he said. He didn't mean it as poetry, but it sounded like a sentence from a book he hadn't chosen. By second period, the rumors had taken the shape of logistics. Who brought water? Who had lined up speakers? Who had paint on their fingers from making signs in the art room? Before the bell, Ms. Ramos, the art teacher, gave out cardboard under the table and said nothing out loud. Black paint's in the second drawer, she murmured instead. Don't stain your clothes. In AP English, Mr. Vu had ditched the planned sonnet lesson and taped a sheet of paper to the board. Words to use when you don't want to get steamrolled by official language. Beneath it he had written impact, consent, dignity, pattern, Policy. He pretended to take attendance, while actually marking who might need a call later, if they didn't show up to third. Listen, he said softly. If you're walking out, put your phones on airplane mode until you're out of the building. No geofencing pings. Then turn them on and film everything. No shoving. No yelling back. If someone asks you a question that makes you smaller, answer with a bigger question. They all looked at Darius without meaning to. He stared at the word consent until the letters shimmered. When the clock clicked toward the edge of second period, the helicopter came, its sound a slow blade turning the sky. Heads tipped up toward windows. In the office, Kendall winced, then straightened his tie and walked the halls, resisting every urge to stop students and ask them to sit, to wait, to trust a process whose emails he had read. Instead, he opened classroom doors and said the same sentence with the same even tone, as if evenness might prevent escalation. If you choose to participate, he said, do so peacefully, stay on campus, keep right-of-ways clear. Mrs. Hartman wasn't in the building. HR had called her the night before and instructed her to remain at home. She stood in her kitchen now, blinds slanted, a coffee mug cooling in her hand. The television talked in the corner, the words paid administrative leave crawling across the bottom like an accusation, and a shield. Her finger hovered over the remote. She imagined the students outside, imagined the kids from her first years teaching who had sent cards when she won awards. She pictured their faces on the wrong bodies, and told herself again that she had been trying to fix, not harm. The sentence did what it had done since childhood. It kept her still. Third period began in a hush that lasted 10 seconds. The first door opened. Then, another. The hush cracked, and the hallways filled with bodies moving with the deliberation of a single thought. They streamed past the trophy case, past the framed mission statement, past the faded photo of a winning team holding helmets under a sky much like today's. Students from every corridor and every breakfast table, band kids and varsity starters and quiet library regulars, flooded the stairs. Someone started the chant low and slow, so it wouldn't burn out. Keep your hands off our hair. The words gathered themselves and grew. Darius walked in the middle of it, because there was no edge to the crowd to hide in. Kyra found him without forcing the meeting, slipping in beside him like a rhythm aligning. You okay? She asked, eyes forward. I don't know, he said, which had become his answer because every other one felt like pretending. We'll keep the speeches short, she said, no pressure on you to talk. He nodded and stared at the exit, the slice of daylight that felt like a question they were about to try to answer with their bodies. Outside, the field waited like an auditorium. The bleachers were a ribcage of steel. The grass wore the pale scars of seasons. The helicopter circled, drawing a thick invisible circle around the school. Someone had dragged the drama club's flimsy podium out to the 50-yard line, the school's logo peeling from its front. A student from AV had a portable speaker. A teacher had a power strip, and the permission to look the other way. The signs rose like a forest. Our hair is not a distraction. Teach history, don't repeat it. Cut the policy. We are not pilot programs. A Channel 7 drone hovered at a polite distance. Leah stood just beyond the track, talking to a camera with the calm of someone who had seen a story became a street. We're live at Franklin High, she said. Students have organized a walkout following leaked emails, suggesting district officials anticipated stricter appearance code language. The district has placed Mrs. Hartman on leave. The students say that's not enough. Kiara mounted the podium first, and didn't call for quiet because no one was loud. We're not here to throw punches, she said, voice amplified, but steady. We're here to insist on policies that do not turn our bodies into infractions. So we're going to sit, and we're going to speak, and we're going to listen. That's it. They sat, hundreds of them. The sight of it, the sudden stillness made the helicopter sound seem overly dramatic, like a soundtrack added by a producer who didn't trust the power of quiet. A teacher laid bottles of water in a row and backed away. The school nurse stood by the gate with a first aid kit and a look that said she hoped she wouldn't need it. Kendall positioned himself near the track, hands clasped, scanning for sparks. Kiara gestured to the side of the podium. If you have a story about being told you were distracting or unprofessional for your natural hair, your scarf, your braids, come share. If you don't want to talk, hand me your words and I'll read them. Keep it under a minute so more voices fit. A sophomore named Lila walked up first. She adjusted the mic and said, I got sent to the office last year for a head wrap. It was the week my grandmother died. The wrap was black. She stepped down, and the students breathed the hearing of it. A junior from the basketball team spoke next. My coach said my twists looked loose and asked if I was letting myself go. I was averaging 18 points. The only thing I'd let go was my fear of humidity. It made them laugh. Small, real relief, dressed as humor. Another student told a story. Then another. Each landed like a weight that built, not to break but to anchor. Kiara looked over at Darius once, checking for any sign he wanted to step forward. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly. She nodded back. A promise kept. And then the twist they hadn't planned. A teacher they did not expect. Mr. Wallace, a pale, soft-spoken science instructor who wore bow ties without irony, took a breath, walked to the mic, and lifted his hand for a second. "I'm going to use this time to confess," he said, voice trembling enough that it steadied itself. 4 years ago, I wrote up a student for wearing a scarf in my lab. I said it was a safety issue. Maybe part of it was, but part of it was me not understanding what I was asking her to remove. I never apologized. I am now. If you're here, I remember you. I was wrong. He stepped back before anyone could absolve him, because he hadn't done it to be lauded. The sound that rose wasn't a cheer. It was a kind of collective exhale, the body realizing it could breathe in honesty. Kiara leaned toward the mic. "Thank you," she said simply. "More of that." Darius felt something shift inside his chest, a small gear turning. He stood before he knew he would. The closest students startled, then parted as he moved without hurry to the podium. He didn't look at the camera. He looked at the space right above it, where the sky held nothing but cold light. He placed his hands on the sides of the lectern as if holding a door open and said, "I don't want to be a symbol. I wanted to answer a question, and then go home." His voice stayed low, so they had to lean in. But it turns out the question in that classroom wasn't about the war in the book. It was about the war some people keep in their desks. No one clapped. He hadn't given them anything that belonged to applause. He stepped down. Kiara put a hand on his shoulder once. Light, not possessive, and the crowd absorbed him back like a human tide. On the street beyond the field, engines idled. A line of dark SUVs rolled to a halt, near the main gate. Uniformed officers stepped out in a choreography that had been practiced too many times in other places for other reasons, and the sight of it made the nurse's throat tighten. The officers did not raise their voices. They did not need to. The presence itself said time's up. Kendall moved quickly, palms up. "This is a peaceful demonstration," he told the nearest officer. "They're sitting. They're sharing stories. We have a directive." The officer replied, hand resting, not gripping, near his belt. "Unlawful assembly on school grounds during instructional hours. We're here to disperse." "They're students," Kendall said, the word heavier than policy. "This is their school." A second helicopter joined the first, the twin rotors making the air stutter. Leah's producer tapped her elbow, eyes wide. "They called in police?" he whispered, already signaling the crew to roll. Kiara stood, mic in hand, and didn't raise her voice. "Everyone stay seated," she said. Phones up. Hands visible. No one engages. Darius looked toward the gate and felt a cold line trace his spine. A memory surfaced uninvited. Being 8 years old, in a store where a guard followed him through 3 aisles. Vanessa's hand squeezing his shoulder, so he wouldn't run. He didn't run now. He watched the officers fan out along the track, watched their eyes hop from sign to sign, watched their mouths set into lines that could become anything. One officer lifted a bullhorn. His voice cracked the air, official and dull. "This is the River City Police Department. You are trespassing. You must disperse immediately or face citation." They were sitting on their school's grass. Kiara lifted her own mic but didn't speak into it. She spoke to the students in front of her. "We don't move," she said. "We make them say it again." The bullhorn sounded once more, the phrase identical, the cadence like a lesson no one wanted to learn. The officers took a synchronized step forward. The drone camera dipped to capture the angle where 2 lines, children seated, officers standing, were about to meet. Leah's voice, hushed but clear, threaded into the broadcast. "Police have arrived at Franklin High. Students remain seated. Tensions," she paused, choosing the unsensational word that was still true, "are rising." And then the gate clicked once more. Not with officers this time but with district security waving someone through. Elias Monroe slid in. Suit jacket open, tie loosened, phone already at his ear. He caught Vanessa's gaze across the field and raised a single finger, Hold just as the officer with the bullhorn took another step and opened his mouth to issue the final warning. The officer lifted the bullhorn for the final warning, breath pulling into the hollow of the plastic, when Elias's voice cut across the track without amplification measured, unmistakable. "Captain, counsel for the family, give me 30 seconds. The officer turned, annoyed at the disruption of choreography. Elias didn't flinch. "You escalate here," he said evenly. And the story becomes police removing seated minors at a school protest 2 hours after leaked emails. "I'm asking for the superintendent, 5 minutes, and a dispersal plan that doesn't involve citations or cuffs." A beat. The captain weighed cameras, optics, and paperwork against pride. He lowered the bullhorn. 5 minutes, he said. And to his squad, hold. The field exhaled, one collective muscle unclenching. Kiera's mic picked up a whispery rush that sounded like wind over reeds. Vanessa caught Elias's eye in gratitude that didn't need words. Kendall jogged awkwardly along the track, suit shoes slipping on rubber, phone to his ear. "Dr. Cho, we need you here. Now." 10 minutes later, a compromise took shape like a bridge drawn in chalk. Students would remain seated for 15 more minutes, after an open mic from 3 speakers, 1 student, 1 teacher, 1 parent. The crowd would stand and walk together to the sidewalk, where the demonstration could continue after dismissal. No citations if the plan held. No one pretended it satisfied everyone. It didn't have to. It kept the story from cracking into something it could never heal from. When they finally rose and streamed to the edges of campus, the drone followed like a patient eye. The helicopters drifted back, bored once escalation evaporated. The first SUV pulled away. The captain holstered his bullhorn. The bell rang pointlessly into air already thick with a different lesson. By sundown, the city divided itself into living rooms where dinner cooled behind arguments. On one street, a father in a contractor's polo folded his arms and muttered, "Teacher's been there decades. She's old school. You don't throw your elders to the wolves because of one mistake." Across town, a grandmother spooned collards into a bowl and said to her daughter, "We fought to wear our hair the way God grew it. They still want to cut us back to fit their picture frame. Don't tell that boy to be patient. Tell him to be loud." At the corner of Maple and 7th, the neighborhood barber shop ran the local news on mute. A young barber with sleeve tattoos traced his own fade with one hand and shook his head. "They keep calling it a discipline issue," he told the room. "We know what it is. It's control." On talk radio, a host who loved a clean controversy opened the phones. The calls came like weather fronts. "My daughter had that teacher," said a woman whose voice carried the confidence of carpools and fundraisers. "She's tough. We need tough. Kids today are too sensitive." A second caller, older, voice smoke rough. "I wore an afro to school in 72, and they sent me home." Same word then as now. Distracting. "We just decorate the same fence with new paint." A third, "Why does everything have to be about race?" The host let each land, then turned to the camera he had installed in his booth, when radio learned to be television, and said, "Because sometimes it is." Sunday morning pews filled with people who hadn't been in months. Pastors reworked sermons between the book of Isaiah and the latest feed. At St. Matthew Baptist, Reverend Eliza Hightower placed a hand on the pulpit and said, "There are 2 kinds of peace, one the world gives when you sit down and shut up, and the other God gives when you stand up and tell the truth." Amens scattered like birds taking flight. 5 blocks away, a white steepled church split itself across its own aisle. The pastor prayed for healing on all sides and wisdom for our educators, his voice careful as glass. Afterward, in the fellowship hall, a deacon whispered, "We should invite Miss Hartman to speak," while a teen snapped, "Invite Darius." Meanwhile, the teachers' union hall, fluorescent lit and earnest, filled with people who measured their lives in lesson plans and laminator jams. The union president, a black woman named Shonda Price, stood behind a folding table dotted with coffee rings. "We are not a shield for harm," she began, eyes sweeping the room. "We are a shield for process and for the dignity of labor and students. Both." A grizzled middle school teacher raised a hand. "If we don't defend her right to due process today, the district will steamroll all of us tomorrow." A younger teacher replied, voice tight, "If due process reads like indifference to kids being humiliated, we lose them for a generation." Shonda held up both palms. "We can hold 2 truths. We can demand a fair investigation, and say masking bias as standards is not pedagogy. She turned to a stack of resolution drafts, found the one she had written at dawn, and read, "The union condemns any practice that polices students' natural hair or cultural expression. We call for a district-wide policy explicitly protecting hair texture and styles. We demand that the investigator have cultural competency. We affirm the right of educators to due process." She looked up. All those in favor. Hands went up. Not all. Enough to matter. At the school board office, lines formed not for public comment. There was no official meeting, but for camera time. Channel 7 set up on the lawn. Leah, calm as always, filed small updates as the day stretched. Parents approached the mic like witnesses entering a courtroom that finally had a door open. A white mother in a Franklin Falcons hoodie choked up. "Mrs. Hartman changed my son's life. He has dyslexia. She tutored him for free. This is not who she is." A black father in a suit too big in the shoulders spoke next. Steadier. "Who she is to you does not cancel what she did to him. Good people cause harm. The harm still counts." His words hung like a bell. Then came the twist no one had planned for. A PTA board member named Karina Black, late 30s, nails glossy, voice precise, stepped into the frame and said, "My family knows Mrs. Hartman personally. She wrote my daughter a college rec. She attended our Juneteenth cookout. She's not a cartoon villain." She paused, and a hush formed to receive the "but." They could all feel. "But my niece was in her class, and stopped wearing her natural hair because of comments Hartman made. Two truths. We can love people and hold them accountable. If she loves our kids, she will sit with what she did without asking us to carry it for her." The comment section online slid sideways, then steadied. Complexity doesn't trend as fast as outrage, but it lasts longer. Karina's clip did both. By afternoon, the hashtags hardened into identities. "Stand with Hartman" appeared, pushed by alumni who remembered tough chemistry quizzes and letters of recommendation. A Facebook group formed around it, bannered with an old yearbook photo of Hartman smiling with a stack of papers. The moderator posted a list of talking points, emphasized decades of service, question out of context video, call for patience. Opposite it grew. "Protect our kids, and cut the policy, not the kids." There feeds a braid of testimony and analysis. A youth-led account posted a carousel explaining the Crown Act, in plain language, ending with, "If your school doesn't explicitly protect hair, it doesn't protect you." The slide was shared 50,000 times and printed for church bulletin boards by evening. In the middle stood people like Kendall, who spent his day taking calls that sounded the same but meant different things. "You've abandoned teachers," one man accused. "You're defending racists," another said. He answered both with phrases he believed and hated. "We're investigating. We value every child. We must follow process." At Vanessa's kitchen table, Simone slid a ziplocked bag across the wood. Inside, a single braid lay coiled. One section bleached a harsh, uneven blonde. The room seemed to tilt. The heft of proof in plastic. Vanessa swallowed. Darius stared at it as if it were something alive. "Keep it," Simone said. "Or copy it. I just need someone to finally believe it happened." "We believe you," Vanessa said. The words a promise and an apology for all the times we hadn't. Elias took a photo with a ruler beside the braid for scale, then sealed the bag again like a pharmacist handling medicine. "Chain of custody starts now," he said softly. "Simone, I'll draft your statement tonight." Simone nodded, then hesitated. You might also want to know she's got friends on the board. Not just emails, actual friends." "We all have friends," Elias replied. "Some of us also have evidence." Evening slid into town halls that weren't town halls, Instagram lives, backyard circles, group texts swollen with paragraphs. A black conservative pastor recorded a clip urging forgiveness and warning against mob mentality. A beloved black coach countered with a video shot on his porch, saying, "Mob is what they call community when it's inconvenient." The district released a second statement at 7:03 p.m., tighter lawyered to the edge. "We have retained an independent investigator. We ask the community to refrain from inflaming rhetoric." The phrase "inflaming rhetoric" lit its own small fire. Someone screen-capped it and paired it with the image of the scissors. In a small ranch house on a quiet cul-de-sac, Mrs. Hartman watched herself scroll past again and again, still frames freezing her at the worst fraction of a second. Her husband, Mark, hovered at the thresholds of rooms without entering them. "You need to say something," he said finally. "Anything. Anything will be wrong," she answered. That's how these things work. A text buzzed. Karina. Yes, the same Karina who had spoken on camera had written. Colleen, please. You have to talk to someone credible. Tell the truth you believe. Whatever it is, hiding makes it worse. Another buzz. A number she didn't recognize. This is Leah Benton, Channel 7. I would like to offer you a live interview unedited tomorrow. You'll be able to speak directly to the community. We'll fact-check claims in real time. Consider it. People are deciding who you are without you. Hartman stared at the name, thumb hovering. Liv? She whispered. Mark nodded at the phone like it was a cliff she was already standing on. She thought of her first year teaching, the quiet boy who wrote poems in the margins of lab reports. She thought of Simone's braid, though she had not seen it, only felt the drag of its existence. She thought of Darius's eyes after the scissors closed, a flash of something she hadn't expected to find there. Not fear but disbelief at how small she had made his world in a second. She told herself the sentence that had been her raft. I was trying to help. It no longer held her weight. She typed yes and paused, then added unedited. She hit send. Across town, Leah's screen blinked. She looked up at her producer, heartbeat quickening but voice cool. She agreed. She said, Liv? He asked. Liv, she answered, already sketching the questions in her mind. Already feeling the city lean toward the hour. And as text pinged between lawyers and pastors, parents and students, the push alert jumped to phones citywide. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., exclusive live interview with Mrs. Colleen Hartman. The night before the interview, River City seemed to hold its breath. Every phone alert that buzzed after dinner was another reminder. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. live. Leah Benton's exclusive with Mrs. Colleen Hartman had already drawn 3 competing hashtags. Hear her out, cut the policy not the kids, and truth at 6, each claiming the coming hour would prove them right. In Hartman's home, the blinds stayed closed, the rooms dim except for the lamp over the kitchen table, where she sat with her husband Mark, and her attorney Martin Fisk. Martin was a man whose suits looked pressed even in the rain, whose sentences rarely ended without a cautionary clause. You need to remember, he said, tapping his pen on the yellow pad. This is not the trial. You are not under oath, but every word will be dissected like evidence. You speak in themes, not specifics. Your theme tonight is, I acted out of care, not malice. Hartman nodded, repeating it like a line from a script. Care, not malice. Martin leaned in. You don't mention the pilot dress code. You don't mention Simone Carter. If Leah asks about prior complaints, you say, I can't speak to confidential student matters. You keep your voice calm and avoid sounding defensive. Mark glanced between them. And if she tries to paint you as racist, you pivot, Martin said. Say, I believe in high standards for all students. Then talk about the multicultural club, your tutoring, whatever reinforces you treat everyone equally. Hartman took a sip of water, hands shaking just enough to ripple the surface. I've been teaching 23 years. I thought my record spoke for itself. Tonight, Martin said, you speak for it. At 5:58 p.m., Channel 7 studio lights washed the set in a glow that made skin look even and paper look white as snow. Leah sat across from Hartman at a small glass table, cards in hand, her posture calm but forward, an interviewer ready to hear and challenge. On the screen above the desk, the Chiron read, Exclusive, Mrs. Colleen Hartman speaks out on viral classroom incident. Leah began without small talk. Mrs. Hartman, thank you for being here. Hartman folded her hands in her lap. Thank you for allowing me to speak directly to the community. Leah nodded once. Let's start plainly. The video shows you cutting a student's hair after he answered a question in class. What were you trying to do? Hartman inhaled, recalling Martin's coaching. I was trying to help a young man understand that presentation matters in academic and professional life. It was not punishment. It was guidance. Leah didn't blink. Guidance with scissors. I keep scissors in my desk for classroom projects, Hartman said quickly. When I saw that his hair was, she paused, searching for a word that didn't sound like judgment, and found one that would betray her. A distraction. I thought a small adjustment could help him focus. Leah let the word hang. A distraction. Hartman nodded. Not just to me, but to other students. In certain settings, certain styles, they draw attention that takes away from the work at hand. Across the city, living rooms stiffened. The comment sections running live beside the broadcast on multiple platforms, lit with responses. Certain styles, certain kids. She just said the quiet part loud. What's distracting is her bias. Leah leaned in. Certain styles like natural black hair? Hartman hesitated. I wouldn't frame it that way. But you did call his style a distraction. I call any style that obstructs learning a distraction. Hartman said, the word sharper now. If a student came in with neon spikes or neon dye grows out. Leah interrupted. Her tone still measured. Natural texture doesn't. Do you see the difference? Hartman's fingers tightened in her lap. I see a difference in what society accepts as professional. Who defines professional? Leah asked. Hartman opened her mouth, closed it, then said employers, institutions, the world my students will enter. Leah's expression didn't change, but the pause before her next question was deliberate. So if the world is biased, your role is to teach compliance rather than question the bias. Martin shifted in his seat off camera. Hartman pressed on, sensing control slipping but trying to reclaim it. My role is to prepare students for reality, and reality isn't always fair. And in preparing him for that reality, Leah said quietly, you made it real. The line landed. Somewhere online, someone clipped it instantly, the subtitles auto-generating as the words rolled from Leah's mouth. Hartman tried to soften her tone. I care deeply for all my students. I've mentored students of every background. I've attended family events, celebrated cultural holidays. Leah raised a card from her stack. We've obtained a 2016 complaint from a parent named Angela Carter regarding her daughter, Simone. It alleges you applied bleach to part of the girl's hair without consent. The district marked it resolved. Did that happen? Martin straightened, leaning into the frame. My client can't speak to confidential student records. Leah kept her eyes on Hartman. I'm not asking for details about the student's record. I'm asking if you ever applied a chemical to a student's hair. Hartman looked down, then back up. It was a misunderstanding. I was helping her prepare for a presentation. So it did happen, Leah said. Hartman's voice rose a fraction. It wasn't harmful. It was cosmetic. The chat feed exploded. Not harmful? Who gets to decide that? This is why we don't trust high standards talk. Leah glanced at the camera, then back at Hartman. 2 incidents, 2 black students, both times you altered their hair without consent. Do you see why people call that a pattern? Hartman shook her head. People are reading malice into actions meant to elevate, not diminish. I believe in setting the bar high, even if it means making uncomfortable corrections. Leah's pen stilled over her notes. And you believe cutting a student's natural hair unasked is a correction? Hartman exhaled. Yes, if it serves their future. The sentence was airless. Martin's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. Leah didn't need to press further. Hartman had given the pull quote the internet would use until the trial. They moved to closing remarks, but the room had shifted. Public opinion wasn't tilting. It was collapsing against Hartman in real time. Viewers who had tuned in to defend her wrote, I thought she'd own it. She doubled down. Others who had waited for proof of bias typed, there it is. As the cameras cut and the outro music played, Leah extended a polite hand. Hartman shook it, but her eyes were glassy, not from tears, more from realizing she had been both heard and undone. Martin didn't wait for her to stand. He leaned close, voice low and final. Colleen, I can't represent you going forward. She blinked. What? You ignored my advice, admitted to prior conduct, an articulated intent that undermines any defense we could mount. It's over for me anyway. Hartman stared at him, color draining. You're quitting? Here? Now? Before the case starts, Martin said, gathering his pad. Better for both of us. He left her sitting under the cooling studio lights, the buzz of the equipment fading into a silence that felt like the first echo of something breaking wide open. The morning after the interview, River City woke into a different landscape. The air carried the residue of Hartman's words. Yes, if it serves their future, like a scent no one could shake. On the sidewalks outside Franklin High, clusters of students rewatched the clip on their phones, each replay a fresh sting. At a downtown coffee shop, a pair of lawyers whispered over lattes, shaking their heads at the unraveling strategy. In Vanessa Hill's living room, sunlight sliced across Elias Monroe's open briefcase. A neat row of folders lined the couch arm. Simone Carter's affidavit on top, followed by printed screenshots of the leaked district emails. Then the complaint log showing disproportionate appearance write-ups in Hartman's classes. Elias spoke while flipping pages, his voice steady but clipped with purpose. We have Hartman's admission on record from last night. We have prior conduct corroborated by multiple witnesses. We have a paper trail showing the district knew about appearance-based targeting. That's not just one bad act. It's a pattern. And patterns win civil rights cases. Darius sat cross-legged on the floor, silent, listening. His hands rested loosely in his lap, but every so often his fingers flexed, as if still remembering the moment the scissors closed. Vanessa leaned forward, elbows on her knees. So what's the move? The move, Elias said, pulling a stapled packet from his briefcase, is this. He slid it across the coffee table. The heading read, Complaint for Damages, Injunctive Relief, and Declaratory Judgment, United States District Court. Vanessa scanned the first page. Federal court? Yes. We're alleging violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and state-level protections under the Crown Act. We're not just seeking damages. We're asking the court to order the district to adopt explicit enforceable anti-discrimination policies around student appearance and cultural expression. If we win, the policy changes for every student, not just Darius. Her eyes lifted from the page. And if we lose? Elias's gaze didn't waver. Then they think twice before targeting the next kid, because they'll know we're willing to fight in daylight. By noon, the suit was filed. A clerk stamped it with the weight of officialdom. And within minutes, the docket number was public. Local outlets picked it up first, then regional. By 2 p.m., a national education reporter tweeted a link to the PDF. The headline that followed was blunt. Family of Black student files federal civil rights lawsuit against teacher district after haircutting incident. Camera crews returned to Franklin High's front gate, like weather systems circling a storm's eye. Students waved at the lenses, some holding up handmade signs reading "Hair is ours" and "No more pilot programs on our heads." Channel 7 brought Leah Benton back to the field for a midday live hit. The lawsuit seeks not only monetary damages, but sweeping policy reforms that would impact how all students in the district are treated. She told viewers. Attorney Elias Monroe says this case could set precedent well beyond River City. Inside the district office, a hastily convened meeting tried to triage the damage. Superintendent Cho read the complaint silently, his jaw tightening. They want policy language in the injunction, he said. That's the headline. Communications Director Nolan Fry tapped his pen nervously. It's not just headlines. If they get that injunction, we're talking public admission that our existing policy framework is insufficient. That's expensive. And political suicide. Trustee Devon Pierce didn't bother hiding his satisfaction. It's also the truth. 2 days later, the case widened. It started with a phone call to Elias from a woman in her late 40s, named Marlene Harris. I'm not looking for money, she said. But when my son was in her class 8 years ago, she told him his cornrows looked too urban for academic competitions. He wore them anyway. She cut him from the debate team. The next call came from a man in his 20s. I was in middle school. She said my locks made me look lazy. I didn't tell my mom. I just cut them. Then came another, an aunt whose niece was told her puff blocked the board for other students. By the end of the week, 5 families had joined as co-plaintiffs. The complaint was amended to reflect a broader claim: systemic targeting of Black students under subjective appearance standards, condoned by the district through inaction. Local media turned the additions into a running series, The Hartman Files. Each night at 6, Leah aired another story, each voice different, but threaded by the same harm. National outlets followed suit, assigning reporters to comb through Hartman's personnel file, to interview alumni, to knock on doors. At a press conference outside the federal courthouse, Elias stood flanked by Vanessa, Darius, and the new co-plaintiffs. He spoke without notes. This is not about one haircut. It's about a system that lets authority treat identity as an infraction. This lawsuit asks the court to do what the district would not: protect its students equally. Vanessa stepped up next, her voice measured but sharp. They told my son to present himself appropriately. I'm telling the district to present itself appropriately to the people it serves. The crowd of supporters broke into applause, a wall of sound that even the morning traffic couldn't drown. The trial date announcement hit like another aftershock. Federal court in 6 months. Enough time for the district to mount a defense. Enough time for the case to marinate in public consciousness. Every school board meeting until then would be conducted under the weight of it. Elias warned Vanessa that the scrutiny would intensify. They'll try to paint you as opportunistic. They'll dig for anything they can call a motive besides justice. They can dig, she said. They'll find we've been raising this boy with the truth since he could talk. But the real twist came not from the district, but from Hartman's new legal team. Late on a Friday afternoon, while most people were thinking of dinner and weekend errands, a press release hit inboxes across River City. For immediate relief, counsel for Mrs. Colleen Hartman announces the filing of a counterclaim in federal court. The claim alleges defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and professional harm caused by the plaintiff's public statements and social media campaign. The counterclaim seeks damages and retraction of statements deemed false and malicious. The words defamation and emotional distress jumped out in bold. Within minutes, local news anchors were reading it live. The framing was jarring. Hartman was no longer just defending herself. She was accusing Darius's family of harming her. On social media, the reaction was instant. Supporters of the family called it a smear to scare them into silence. Hartman's defenders saw it as her fighting back against what they called trial by Twitter. At the Hill household, Darius read the statement twice, then set the phone down slowly. "She's saying we hurt her." Vanessa's lips pressed into a line. It's what people do when the truth corners them. They turn the corner into an attack. Elias took the paper from her, scanning it. His face didn't change, but his voice held a quiet steel. This isn't just PR. They've made it part of the case, which means they think they can make a jury believe it. And can they? Darius asked. Elias looked up from the page. Only if we let them define the harm. Outside, the late sun stretched the shadows of the houses across the street, until they touched, long fingers meeting in the middle of the road. The air felt still but not settled, like the pause before weather turns. Elias set the paper down. "We'll respond," he said. "And when we do, it won't just be about this family. It'll be about every kid whose dignity was treated like a dress code violation." Vanessa nodded, but her eyes stayed on Darius. She could already feel the weight of the next chapter pressing in. Somewhere downtown, in a high-rise conference room, with the blinds half drawn, Hartman's lawyers were likely clinking coffee cups over the surprise they'd just dropped. But what none of them knew, not yet, was that the counterclaim would open the door to evidence neither side had fully anticipated. Evidence that could tilt the entire case in a direction no one had planned for. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to every bench and rail. On the morning of opening testimony, the hallway outside courtroom 3B hummed with the rustle of reporters' notepads and the click of phone cameras, trying to capture the faces of those stepping through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, falling across the polished jury box where 12 strangers sat with hands folded in cautious attention. Judge Miriam Caldwell, a stern woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a low bun, presided from the bench. Her voice, when she addressed the court, carried a weight that stilled the air. Julius Monroe's table was neatly organized, color-coded folders, labeled binders, and a single yellow legal pad, where he had written 2 words in block capitals: "Truth first." Across the aisle, Hartman's new legal team sat in darker suits, laptops open, their expressions carefully neutral. Hartman herself sat between them, her hands clasped in her lap, a faint sheen of powder on her cheeks that couldn't quite disguise the drawn lines around her eyes. The first student witness, Lila James, stepped to the stand. She was a junior at Franklin High, her hair styled in tight, intricate braids. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she began to speak. "She told me once that my braids looked too busy for the classroom," Lila said, her eyes fixed on Elias. "I didn't think I could say anything, so I just smiled. But after that, I started wearing my hair in a bun, just to avoid comments." Elias guided her gently. "And did Mrs. Hartman ever discipline you for your behavior or academic performance?" "No," Lila said. "Just my hair." In the jury box, a middle-aged woman in the second row shifted slightly, her lips pressed together. Hartman's attorney rose for cross-examination. "Ms. James, would you agree that Mrs. Hartman also made comments to students about other kinds of appearance, sloppy uniforms, hats in class? Excessive jewelry?" Lila hesitated. "I guess, but she never told anyone else their hair was too busy." The lawyer leaned in. "Or perhaps you didn't notice when she corrected other students." Lila's voice grew sharper. "I noticed. It wasn't the same." A faint murmur rippled through the gallery before the judge called for order. Next came Simone Carter, the witness everyone in the room seemed to lean forward for. She stepped to the stand in a black blazer, her copper-streaked twists catching the light. 7 years ago, she began. She told me my beads would distract the class during my presentation. I told her they were part of my style. She said, "Not in this room." Then she took out a bottle of bleach from her desk and applied it to one braid before I could stop her. Gasps dotted the room, though most had heard the story before in news reports. Still, hearing it here, under oath, seemed to give it a new gravity. Hartman's attorney tried to chip away. "Miss Carter, is it possible that Mrs. Hartman's intent was to reduce glare from the beads under classroom lighting?" Simone's eyebrows arched. "Her intent doesn't matter when my consent was never given." The jury's foreman, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, glanced at the woman beside him. She didn't return the look. The most tense moment came when Hartman's team began its offensive against Darius himself. They called a former classmate, a boy named Mason Reed, who claimed Darius could be sarcastic and sometimes didn't take things seriously in class. "Would you say," Hartman's lawyer asked, "that he sometimes tried to get a reaction from Mrs. Hartman?" Mason shrugged. "Maybe, but she got a reaction from him first that day." Elias rose for redirect, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Reed, have you ever seen Mrs. Hartman use scissors to cut another student's hair in class?" "No." "And have you ever seen any other teacher do that?" Mason shook his head. "No." Elias nodded. No further questions. Still, the seed had been planted, a suggestion that Darius wasn't the perfect victim. In the jury box, some faces remained impassive. Others betrayed the smallest flickers of doubt. Then Elias called Darius himself. The boy walked to the stand with a quiet grace, the uneven patch from the cut long since grown out, but his gaze still shadowed. "Tell the jury what happened that day," Elias prompted. Darius spoke slowly, as if weighing each word. "She asked me a question about the Civil War. I said it was about states' rights. She told me that was wrong. Then she came over with scissors and cut my hair. I didn't understand what was happening until I heard the sound." Elias asked, "How did that make you feel?" Darius looked at the jury, not his lawyer. "Small, like my body didn't belong to me anymore." A man in the back row of the jury blinked rapidly, his hands clasped tighter in his lap. By the afternoon, the air in the courtroom felt thick with everything unsaid. Hartman's defense tried to regain ground, painting her as a strict but fair teacher who held everyone to the same high bar. They brought in a former student who had received scholarships, crediting Hartman's discipline for his success. But every witness in her favor was met with Elias's quiet reminder. "Did she ever cut your hair?" The answer was always no. Then, as the day's light began to tilt through the tall windows, Judge Caldwell announced there was time for one more witness before recess. "Elias, the plaintiffs call Vanessa Hill," he said. Vanessa walked to the stand in a tailored navy dress, her posture upright, the kind of composure that made people listen before she spoke. She swore the oath, sat, and folded her hands. Elias began gently. "Mrs. Hill, you've been present for this trial from the beginning. You've heard the testimony. Tell us what you believe this case is about." Vanessa looked at the jury. "It's about dignity. It's about a teacher thinking she could take a piece of my son without asking, because she thought it would make him better for her world. And it's about how that world tells kids like him to shrink themselves until they fit someone else's frame." Elias nodded. "And how has this incident affected your son?" Her eyes softened. "He's quieter, more guarded, but also more determined. He knows now, in a way I wish he didn't, that not everyone who says they're helping you is on your side." Elias glanced at his notes, then back to her. "Mrs. Hill, is there anything else you'd like the jury to know about Darius?" She hesitated. For the first time since taking the stand, her gaze dropped to her lap. The pause stretched long enough for the judge to lean forward slightly. "Yes," Vanessa said finally, her voice lower now. "Something I've never said publicly. Something even Darius doesn't know." Darius's head snapped toward her. The jury leaned in almost imperceptibly. Vanessa took a breath, her fingers tightening on the armrest. "When Darius was 8, something happened at school. Another teacher, another comment about his hair. I didn't fight it then. I told him to just let it go. I thought I was protecting him from trouble, but I was protecting myself from the fight. And I swore that day that if it ever happened again, I wouldn't stay quiet." She turned toward her son, her voice trembling just enough to carry the truth. "This case is me keeping that promise, even if it costs us more than we think we can bear." Elias opened his mouth to close, but Judge Caldwell raised her hand. "We'll recess until tomorrow." The gavel struck once. The jury rose, and in the low murmur of the gallery, Darius sat still, staring at his mother, realizing there was more to that promise than he had ever known, and wondering what it might cost next. The gavel's echo hadn't fully left the wood when morning returned the courtroom to its hush. Vanessa's admission, the quiet confession that she once told 8-year-old Darius to let it go, had drifted home with the jurors, ridden shotgun through their commutes, and took a seat beside them now like an uninvited guest. Judge Caldwell adjusted her glasses and nodded to Elias. "You may proceed." Vanessa remained on the stand, palms resting on her skirt, eyes clear but rimmed with the fatigue of a mother who had slept in fragments. Elias kept his voice low, threading continuity from yesterday's break. "Mrs. Hill, you testified that you stayed quiet once before. Why tell that story now?" "Because silence pretends there's no cost," Vanessa said. "There is always a cost. My son paid it back then. I won't make him pay it twice." In the jury box, the foreman's thumb rubbed the edge of his notepad. Beside him, a woman in a slate blazer, an HR manager by trade, kept her expression cool, but her pen had stopped moving. Hartman's lead counsel, a woman named Avery Sloan, with a courtroom voice honed to a blade, rose for cross-examination. She wore concern like a tailored suit. "Mrs. Hill, you're a savvy communicator. You recorded, you posted, you engaged the press, correct?" Vanessa met her gaze. "I documented harm. And you understood that doing so would create a media storm." "I understood it would create a record," Vanessa said. "Storms arrive whether or not you bring an umbrella." Very nodded, sympathetic, and telling your son to let it go as a child. "Would you agree that sometimes de-escalation is the wiser course?" "De-escalation is not surrender," Vanessa replied evenly. "What I did then was surrender. So this case is in part about your regret." "It's about my promise," Vanessa said. "I promised my child I would show up next time." Very stepped closer, softness thinning. "Or is it about proving something to yourself, to this community, at the expense of a veteran teacher's reputation?" Elias stood. Objection. Argumentative. "Sustained," Judge Caldwell said. "Miss Sloan, move on." Avery's expression didn't flicker. "Mrs. Hill, you testified that you didn't fight earlier incidents. Did you ever apologize to a school for overreacting?" A muscle moved in Vanessa's jaw. "I wrote a letter once. I was told my concerns would be handled internally, if I acknowledged I'd been." She paused, the word tasting like ash. "Overly sensitive. I wanted my boy safe. I wrote what they wanted." The HR manager juror shifted. A near imperceptible wince, admitting recognition. "No further questions," Avery said, but the tidy bow she'd hoped to tie had come loose. The secret had not shrunk the Hills, it had enlarged the system around them. Elias declined redirect. Vanessa stepped down, passing Darius with a touch to his shoulder that said everything trial protocol did not allow. Defense called their expert, Dr. Leonard Phelps, a workplace professionalism consultant, with a dusting of ivory hair and a habit of smoothing his tie before each answer. He listed credentials. He used the word standard like a sacrament. "In your expert opinion," Avery asked, "do hair policies serve legitimate pedagogical goals?" "They can," Phelps said. "Consistency of presentation promotes focus." Elias rose for cross, a single folder in hand. "Dr. Phelps, you've been paid by corporations to defend grooming policies, later amended under pressure from Crown Act advocacy. Is that fair?" Phelps blinked. "Policies evolve. My role is to defend the status quo until it changes." Elias finished. "You gave a seminar in 2019, managing distracting styles and client-facing roles. Do you recall calling locks a risky signal?" "I don't recall that phrasing." Elias lifted the folder, reading. Slide 14, risk signals. "Locks may convey non-conformity." "It's your slide." A murmur rippled. The judge's gavel tapped once. The sound felt less like a reprimand than an underline. Phelps swallowed. "Context matters. It always does," Elias said, letting the sentence hang. Avery tried to rehabilitate on redirect, but the expert's polished edges had dulled. His words clanged against the record he'd built himself. Next, defense called a character witness, Mark Hartman. He took the stand with the careful posture of a husband, trying to be helpful without becoming the story. Avery led gently. "Mark, you've seen your wife devote her life to students. She leaves before sunrise," Mark said, voice tight. "She buys supplies with her own money. She takes calls on holidays. Is she racist?" "No," he said too quickly. He caught himself, softened. She believes in high standards. Maybe too much sometimes. Elias stood for cross, holding a single page. Mr. Hartman, on the night of the incident, you texted your wife. It'll blow over, kids need discipline. Is that your message? Mark stared at the paper, color rising. I was trying to calm her. My words in private aren't the same as. Do you believe children like Darius need to change to deserve dignity? No, Mark said, throat tight. I believe adults need to. Elias nodded. No further questions. He hadn't wounded. He'd simply refused to polish. The jurors' faces were a gallery. The foreman leaning forward. The HR manager still guarded. A young black man in the back row, silent through most testimony, finally taking a long, slow breath. Elias called a rebuttal witness, Principal Kendall. His tie was straight, his shame straighter. Mr. Kendall, Elias began, were prior complaints about appearance-based discipline handled internally? They were acknowledged, Kendall said. Too often, they were shelved, including a complaint from Ms. Angela Carter.
Yes.
And did district emails reference piloting hair language in Mrs. Hartman's classes as a low-risk group before a bond vote? Kendall's eyes flicked to the jury, then back to Elias. They did. Avery rose, fighting for ground. Mr. Kendall, would you agree the district sought to balance competing interests? Student dignity and instructional order? Kendall's mouth tilted with something like grief. We balanced budgets, he said. We should have balanced hearts. Some jurors' eyes flickered, surprise at a bureaucrat allowing himself a human sentence. Avery tried to pivot, calling a vice principal to testify that distractions included hats, AirPods, and all manner of student expression regardless of race. But under Elias's cross, the witness conceded she couldn't recall a single white student written up for hair in Hartman's class. The defense's scaffolding wobbled. Through it all, Hartman sat still, eyes on a middle distance only she could see. Once, when Vanessa's earlier words were quoted back by counsel, a tremor crossed Hartman's mouth, so small it would have been missed if Leah Benton hadn't been watching from the press bench. Pen held like a tuning fork to a frequency the room didn't hear. By late afternoon, the courtroom's light had gone honey thin. Judge Caldwell glanced at the clock. We have time for one additional witness. Elias stood, ready to rest for the day, when a movement at the back caught his eye. The bailiff slipped through the side door and approached the bench with a discreet whisper. The judge listened, brows knitting, then addressed counsel. Counselors, approach. At the sidebar the murmur sharpened. The judge's words were low, but clear enough for the first row to catch fragments. Late disclosure, authentication, foundation. Elias's gaze slid to the back of the room where a woman in a camel coat had just entered, holding a small hard case drive in both hands, as if it were fragile. Judge Caldwell returned to the mic. The court has been notified of a witness with newly surfaced evidence relevant to intent. Over objection, I will permit her to be sworn subject to limiting instruction. The jury will consider admissibility at a later stage, if necessary. Avery's jaw tightened. Your Honor.
Miss Sloan, the judge said.
You'll have your objection on the record. The gallery rustled. A collective tilt toward the aisle. The woman in the camel coat stepped forward, removing sunglasses not out of drama, but because she had walked here from daylight. Karina Alvarez, the PTA board member, who had once stood in front of a camera and tried to hold two truths at once. Her face was set, not in anger, but in decision. Elias's voice dropped a half step, like a runner settling into stride. Please state your name. Karina Alvarez, she said, eyes flicking, only once to Hartman. I have direct messages and a voice memo from Mrs. Hartman from 2 months before the incident. They discuss low-risk periods to pilot hair language and refer to certain students by name as best candidates because, quote, they won't make a fuss. I couldn't carry it in my pocket anymore. The jurors moved, skeptical, poised between leaned as one toward the sound of the zipper on Karina's case. The tiny rasp loud as thunder in the waiting room of justice. The rasp of Karina's zipper still hung in the air when the court reconvened after a short recess that felt like a held breath. The hard case drive lay on the evidence cart between two bottled waters, absurdly ordinary. Judge Caldwell addressed the jury with the caution of a surgeon. You will hear a short excerpt of a recording. You are to consider this evidence only for intent, and only if you find it credible. The clerk pressed play. Hartman's voice, unmistakable, measured, filled the courtroom from tinny speakers. Hair language can roll out during low-risk weeks, she said. Pick students who won't make a fuss. Darius Hill is respectful. He'll fold. A silence landed so heavy the HVAC hum sounded like weather. Hartman's face didn't move, but her hands clasped tighter, knuckles whitening. Avery rose, tone clipped. Your Honor, context. The jury will determine context, the judge said, not unkindly. Elias didn't speak. He let the words do what they were built to do, draw a straight line between policy talk and a child's head. Deliberations began late the next morning. The jury filed out with the careful solemnity of people stepping across a rope bridge. In the gallery, the press rearranged cables as if they could braid certainty out of cords. Vanessa squeezed Darius's hand once and then released it, as if trusting him to stand in his own shape. Hours stretched. The courthouse settled into its own metronome. Footsteps down the corridor, the thunk of the water cooler, a bailiff's cough. Outside, camera crews collected sound bites from anyone who would lean toward a microphone. Alumni who loved Hartman, parents who didn't, students who finally felt seen. Inside the jury room, the first ballot came back fractured. Liability of the district, someone read. Hands rose, most of them. Liability of Mrs. Hartman, slower, then more. Damages, numbers sketched, crossed out, re-sketched. The foreman, patient, kept them moving. The HR manager, juror, stared at the wall clock and thought about every email she had ever sent, labeled, handled internally. The young black man wore silence like armor until he found a sentence to set in front of them. Dignity isn't extra credit, he said. It's the class. By late afternoon, the buzz in the hallway sharpened. Leah checked her phone, then the courtroom door. A deputy pushed it open and signaled, "We have a verdict." People stood before they were told. Hartman and her counsel arranged their faces. Elias capped his pen and set it down as if granting it rest. Vanessa's hand found the edge of the table. Darius's found air. The jurors filed in, eyes sober, no hints at the corners. Judge Caldwell nodded to the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Please hand the verdict forms to the bailiff. Paper passed hand to hand, a rustle that sounded like dry leaves. The clerk read, voice level. In the matter of Hill et al. Vetter River City Unified School District, and Colleen Hartman, on the claim under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act against River City Unified School District, liable. A sound moved through the gallery, half sigh, half prayer. Vanessa closed her eyes just long enough to feel the shape of the word liable. On the claim under Title VI against Colleen Hartman, liable. Avery's jaw tightened. Hartman didn't blink. On the claim under state law, Crown Act violations, against River City Unified School District, liable. Against Colleen Hartman, liable. The judge's gaze flicked briefly toward the jury. Gratitude disguised as gravity. Compensatory damages to the plaintiffs, awarded in the amount of $2 million, apportioned among named plaintiffs. Punitive damages against Colleen Hartman, awarded in the amount of $250,000. Hartman's shoulders dropped a degree, as if someone had set a stack of books onto her back. The clerk turned the page. On the plaintiff's request for injunctive relief, granted, the district shall, within 90 days, adopt and implement policy explicitly protecting natural hair protective styles and cultural expression, train all staff on compliance, and install a reporting mechanism with transparent timelines. A murmur, then a blot of quiet. Even the defense table stilled. This was the part that would outlast everyone in the room. The clerk continued. One last sheet. On the counterclaim of Mrs. Hartman for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress denied. The words fell like a seal closing. Judge Caldwell thanked the jurors. The jurors stared at the tabletop, and the courtroom discovered what relief sounds like when it has been holding its breath for months. Elias turned to Vanessa, exhale almost a laugh. Policy. They granted policy. His voice cracked then, not with victory as spectacle, but with a private awe at a line of text that meant kids would be spared harm by instruction rather than apology. Darius sat very still, as if any motion might shatter the clear thing laid in front of him. When he finally looked at his mother, an expression crossed his face that Vanessa had last seen when he was little, and learned to tie his shoes. Pride, disbelief, a shy gladness cut with the memory of every time it had been otherwise. Hartman's lawyer whispered in her ear. She nodded once, and didn't cry. It wasn't stoicism. It was a stunned arithmetic running through her mind. Then now, after finding no number that solved clean, outside the courthouse, The plaza bloomed into scenes that didn't match. A circle of students hugging and crying, a row of older men shaking their heads, a church group praying with palms up, a pair of alumni clutching a laminated yearbook photo like a passport to a version of the city they preferred. Someone set down a poster board that read, "This was about more than hair," and stepped back to see the words from a distance. Leah went live from the steps. "The jury has found both the district and Mrs. Hartman liable," she told the camera, voice even but striped with the soft rasp of long days at a story's edge. Damages were awarded, and perhaps most significant, the court ordered policy reform with concrete timelines. The counterclaim for defamation was denied. Behind her, cheers rose and fell in waves. The sound had no single note: relief, vindication, fatigue, fury, braided into a chord. National reaction traveled faster than the verdict paperwork. A senator tweeted, "The crown of our children is not a dress code violation." Proud of this precedent, an education think tank warned against court-ordered micromanagement of classrooms. Their press release phrased like a shrug in a suit. A civil rights organization posted a thread explaining how to push similar injunctions in other districts. Their first graphic read from outrage to policy in block letters. On talk radio, the host's phone lines lit red across the board. "Open phones," he said. "Say your piece. Keep it clean." A grandmother's voice. Rich, steady. "I wore a scarf to hide my hair during chemo, and they told me to remove it in Sunday school. Today feels like a promise kept by strangers." A man who introduced himself as a small business owner. "We can't run schools by lawsuit. Teachers are going to quit." A young woman, breathless. "I'm a teacher. I'm not quitting. I'm relieved. Now the policy will say what my heart has been yelling in the copy room." At Franklin High, Mr. Vu taped a fresh sheet of paper to his whiteboard and wrote words with teeth across the top. Under it, injunction, protection, consent, repair. Kids snapped pics. Word would travel back to the group chats and live there as screenshots, study guides for surviving adulthood. In the Union Hall, Shonda Price stood behind a folding table and read the injunction twice, then a third time, then said to no one in particular, "We'll make the training ours before the district makes it a slideshow." A cheer went up. Tired, delighted, someone clinked paper cups of flat ginger ale like champagne. Back on the courthouse steps, Elias faced microphones with that careful calm the city had come to trust. "This verdict doesn't make Darius whole," he said, "but it makes the door wider for the students behind him. We can live with that today." Vanessa stepped forward. "To every parent who told your child to let it go because you were tired or scared, me too. This verdict is permission to stop swallowing the thing that hurts you." Darius didn't speak into any mic. He let Kiara hug him, let Simone rest a hand on his shoulder, let Kendall nod at him, a nod that admitted failure without asking forgiveness for free. He looked up at the courthouse facade, at its blank stone insisting on permanence, and thought, for the first time since the scissors, about the future as something not already cut to someone else's pattern. Down the stairs, a small knot of Hartman supporters clustered beside a banner that read "Stand with Teachers." Their faces wore a calculus of loyalty, fatigue, fear of a profession slipping from their grip. One of them said too loud, "She gave me a reference. I wouldn't be here without her." Another replied, "Two things can be true," and then stared at the ground like he'd stepped into a sentence deeper than he'd intended. Hartman appeared with her attorneys. Sunlight too bright after the courtroom's hush. Microphones rose like sunflowers turning to face heat. She paused at the top step, spine a straight line she had learned from podiums and parent nights. A reporter called Mrs. Hartman. Any response? She looked not at the cameras but at the horizon beyond them, at a slice of river flashing through buildings, and spoke in a voice that had finally lost its scaffolding. "I hear the verdict," she said, "but I also hear fear in our classrooms. Fear that order is gone." She swallowed, eyes glassing. "I'm not finished speaking. Not here. Not to this city. Not to the courts." "Are you appealing?" another reporter asked. Her lawyer began to answer, but Hartman raised a hand, not to silence him, just to finish her own sentence. "There are other venues," she said evenly, "and other stories to tell about what happened in that room." She stepped down one stair, then another, the cameras tracking her like orbiting things, while somewhere in the press row a producer mouthed to a camera op, "We'll need a live slot tonight." She's not done. The injunction hit the district like a bell you couldn't unhear. Overnight, the word distraction disappeared from every policy sheet, scrubbed from handbooks and hallway posters, as if it had never been printed there. In its place came language that felt new in public schools: consent, cultural expression, protective styles. Email subject lines read like a series of small admissions: training calendar, reporting portal live, policy implementation Q&A, and the weight of all that careful phrasing pressed down on offices that had once replied with "handled internally." Kendall stood in the library beside Shonda Price, the union president, to kick off the first district-wide training. A projector hummed. Teachers filled tables with notebooks open, and arms crossed, curiosity and defensiveness, sharing chairs. On the screen, bold text, "From intent to impact, hair identity and classroom power." Beside it, a second slide that said simply, "What we did, what we'll do. We'll do this right," Kendall said, and his voice didn't try to be inspiring. It tried to be plain. "We messed up in public. We'll repair in public. We are not performing. We're adjusting." Shonda took the mic and did what unions do at their best: insisted that dignity is a working condition. "We're going to run this training with the same clarity we want for our kids," she said. "This is not a slideshow we click through while grading papers. This is us changing the water we teach in." The session did not pretend messiness could be tidied away with vocabulary. A veteran teacher cried quietly through a segment on microaggressions and wrote "I said neat when I meant not you" on a sticky note before standing to read it aloud. Mr. Wallace, bow tie steady, told the room what he had told the field. "I wrote a girl up for a scarf and called it safety. It was safety for my comfort." Heads nodded. One or two pairs of eyes rolled. No one left. The reporting portal went live at noon. A clean form, tight timelines, automatic receipts. Students found it within minutes. Screenshots flew. In homerooms, teachers played a 5-minute video that defined consent like a rule, not a plea. The language stopped sounding like law and started sounding like air. At Franklin High, halls felt different. A girl with waist-length box braids high-fived a friend in front of a bulletin board, announcing, "Know your rights, hair and identity." Mr. Vu's room smelled like dry erase marker and new paper. He wrote essay prompt: "Describe a rule that changed what you believed was possible," and told the class they could write about any world. Home, school, TikTok, the kitchen sink. He glanced at Darius without lingering. Unwanted fame doesn't feel like fame. It feels like a light that doesn't turn off. Darius walked past the trophy case and saw his reflection next to a news crawl replaying Leah's coverage on silent. A freshman whispered to a friend, "That's him," like he was a rumor you could bump into. DM requests multiplied. A podcast in New York, a student panel in Portland, a brand asking to collaborate on a hair pride campaign with an emoji he didn't click. At lunch, Kiara slid a tray onto his table, the way people do when they want to stay friends without admitting the room has changed. "There's a youth summit next month," she said. "They'll fly you out. Keynote. You'd get a stipend." "I don't want a stage," he said, not unkind. "I want a day where my name isn't someone else's sentence." She nodded, even though her eyes flickered with the sting of a cause needing a face and not wanting to borrow his. "Then we say no. Saying no can be activism." That afternoon, Vanessa found a small mountain of envelopes in the mailbox. Applause disguised as paper. A senator's office letterhead promised to monitor policy outcomes. A college offered a campus visit, and hair-sympathetic housing options that sounded like a marketer trying to learn empathy in real time. The one that made her sit down came from a grandmother in Palmdale. "I kept my wig on during chemo because the church asked me to. Your boy is a brave river." Vanessa folded that one carefully and tucked it into a cookbook like a pressed flower. They celebrated small, mostly with quiet. A new comb on the bathroom shelf, wide-toothed, like advice. Sunday dinner with extra cornbread. Darius let his coils grow wild on purpose, not as defiance but as decision. He booked an appointment at Rise and Shine Cuts, the barber shop with mismatched chairs and perfect fades. The bell over the door chimed. The owner, Jamal, lifted a chin in greeting. "You want the world to see you," Jamal said. "Or you want to see yourself?" "Both," Darius said, and sat. Scissors whispered, "Not like the day in class." This sound curled around trust. Jamal worked without commentary for the first few minutes, then spoke like a bass line under a melody. "They gave you a scar. Sometimes a line can be a scar that heals." He etched a clean part that didn't erase. It defined. When Darius left, sunlight found his hair like it had been waiting. He took a selfie for no one and didn't post it. The district rolled out changes with a precision born of panic and hope. Complaint response times posted on the website. A committee, students, parents, teachers, and one quiet custodian with stories met in a circle every Thursday to audit the portal and speak names that might otherwise get filed into a drawer. The board passed a resolution to add hair language to coaching handbooks, choir dress codes, lab safety guides. In every corner of school life where appearance had been a floating signifier, definitions suddenly had anchored. People still resisted. An email to the superintendent read, "You've made teaching impossible." A PTA dad stood up at a meeting and asked, "What about the kids with mohawks?" It was always mohawks. No one actually knew a child with one. Shonda answered him with a sentence she could teach in a first-grade classroom. "We can protect identity and teach courtesy at the same time." No one clapped. They didn't need to. The sentence hung. And then Hartman resurfaced, exactly where no one expected her to be. The River City Museum of Freedom and Reconstruction kept a docent program that drew retirees and grad students who wanted to spend Saturdays telling stories to strangers. On a gray morning, Leah walked through the brick arch to film a segment about a new exhibit on contraband camps. Expecting a quiet shoot, she did not expect to turn a corner and see Colleen Hartman in a black blazer, holding a small group of homeschoolers in a semicircle with a tour guide's patience. A laminated badge read Volunteer Docent Training. Leah's producer swore softly. "You seeing this?" Leah exhaled. "I'm seeing something, yes." Hartman's voice carried over to them, careful as it used to be in classrooms. "The word freedom meant different things to different people at different times," she said, gesturing to a display case of letters written in cramped script. "Part of our work is to ask who got to define it." A mother stood nearby, phone in hand, recording with a look that was not quite outrage, and not quite curiosity. The museum director, a black historian with a salt and pepper beard, and the patience of someone who had debated in every church basement within 50 miles, approached Leah before she could lift a mic. "She's in training," he said. She applied, "We're not endorsing, we're teaching." "People will call it a stunt," Leah said. He nodded. "People call learning a lot of names before it becomes wisdom." The clip went up before Leah's segment aired. A bystander's video with a caption that did the internet's favorite thing, flattened complexity into a point. "She's leading tours now. Of this." The comments split like always, only sharper. Some saw penance, others saw a performance that cut in a new way. The museum's inbox became a weather map of the city's feelings. When the notification hit Darius's phone, he watched once without sound, then again with the volume up. He didn't know what to feel. Anger tangled with something that wasn't forgiveness, and wasn't its opposite, just a sense of being followed into rooms he considered holy. He shut the app and walked to the river where the wind pressed shirts to chests, and made empty soda cans roll like low laughter. Vanessa found him on the railing, both hands flat on the cold metal. "You saw," she said. "Yeah." "She's allowed to learn," Vanessa offered. Not because she wanted to, but because she wanted him to have language for the day he might. "Learning on a stage," he said. Vanessa looked out at the water. "Sometimes the only place left to learn is a place where someone can see you fail. It's the worst way. It's also honest." He didn't answer. They stood until the wind made their eyes water in a way that didn't require wiping. That evening, a school email hit inboxes. Hair and identity policy. First month metrics. Numbers were dull and beautiful. Fewer write-ups. Faster responses. A student quote tucked at the bottom like a footnote worth more than the charts. "It feels different to walk in with all of me." Vanessa printed it and taped it to the fridge. They were washing dishes when the doorbell rang. One clean note. No follow-up knock. Darius wiped his hands, crossed the living room, and opened the door to empty air. No one on the porch, only the sound of a delivery truck 2 houses down, and a neighbor's TV laughing at a sitcom. On the doormat sat a thick envelope. No return address. His name in careful blue ink. The kind of cursive taught by people who love rules. He picked it up. It was heavier than a letter should be. Vanessa came to the doorway, and saw his face change into a question. "Who is it from?" she asked. He turned the envelope over. Blank. He ran a thumb under the flap, then stopped, as if the seal were a line that chose the next shape of his life. He looked at his mother, at the table where the policy printout lay, under a magnet, at the window where the night made their reflections float. Vanessa nodded once. "We can open it together," she said. He slid a finger along the seam. Paper yielded with a soft tear, and something inside shifted. A sound like pages and maybe something else. softer nestled between words. He glanced down, eyes widening, and drew in a breath that wasn't quite a gasp. The porch light hummed. The wind pressed a fallen leaf against the step like a hand. Darius lifted whatever was inside just enough to see the edge of it, and froze, heart beating hard into the silence between one life and the next. The envelope split with a soft sigh. Inside was a thick sheet of cream paper, blue ink cursive tilting right, and tucked behind it a small photograph gone sun-faded at the edges. Darius slid the photo free first. A teenage girl in a plaid skirt and stiff blazer stood in front of a Catholic school brick wall, hair hacked short to the scalp on one side, her smile held together by effort. Someone had signed the back in fountain pen loops. Colleen, 1986, tidy at last. Vanessa's breath caught. She sent you herself, she said, trying not to coat the words with anything extra. No pity, no anger, just the fact. Darius unfolded the letter. Darius. They told me not to write. I'm writing anyway because the thing I'm learning too late is that counsel protects you from consequences, not from yourself. I am sorry, the kind you can't fix with a check or a headline. I told the city I acted out of care. That was a lie I believed. The truth is simpler and uglier. Someone taught me as a girl that order is safety, and I kept mistaking control for care. I thought if I prepared you for their room, I was helping you. I made my room the room I feared. That is mine to own. I have resigned my position. I do not plan to teach again. I volunteer at the museum now. Not as absolution, but as apprenticeship to the history I bruised against. They gave me a script. I keep crossing out lines, and writing ask for consent. There is one thing I will not do without your permission. Speak your name in training rooms. If you say no, I will never say it again. If you say yes, I will say your name, like a warning to others who think standards cover harm. Either way, I will carry the cost. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm asking you to choose what becomes of your story in my mouth. Colleen. There was a postscript. Small and tight. P.S. The photo is not an excuse. It's a lineage. I am trying to cut it where I should have cut the lesson. Not your hair. Silence sat with them, at the table. Through the window, twilight pressed its palm to the glass. Somewhere down the block a dog barked twice, and then decided against it. Darius looked again at the girl in the uniform. The hack job haloed her head like a punishment you could mistake for a start. He set the photo beside the letter as if the two belonged in the same frame only for a moment. She is not your homework, Vanessa said, placing a hand near, not on, his wrist. You don't have to solve her. I know, he said. He didn't sound convinced. What do you want? She asked. The question opened a space, and he walked into it. He wanted to crumple the letter and throw it into the sink, and run the tap until the ink blurred. He wanted to write, I forgive you in tiny letters that meant, I will not carry you and, also you cannot carry me into your redemption. He wanted to mail it back empty. He wanted to forget the envelope had ever sat on their doormat, like a choice disguised as paper. He stood, paced the length of the kitchen twice, returned to the chair. If I say yes, he said finally, I become a sentence in her mouth. And if you say nothing? Vanessa asked. Then I keep the sentence, he murmured. And it stays mine. They let the thought turn in the room, until it found an edge. Vanessa nodded once. Either choice is a wound with stitches. One leaves a scar people will ask about. The other is under your shirt. He traced the groove in the wood table with his thumbnail. Everyone online wants me to perform forgiveness like it's a graduation. Hat toss, confetti, a neat end. You don't owe the internet choreography, Vanessa said. He picked up the letter again, read the line about permission. The words held a power he hadn't expected. You can say no. The power stirred something like steadiness, not triumph. Elias will tell us to keep the letter, Vanessa added, practical as ever. Record of consent either way, or non-consent. He smiled without humor. He's right. He took a pen from the drawer, the same kind he used for English essays, and held it like a compass. If I write to her, he said, it's not to fix her. It's to make a boundary you can't misread. Vanessa's shoulders eased. Whatever you write, I'll stand in it with you. And if you write nothing, same. He didn't write yet. He folded the letter along its creases, and slid it back into the envelope, with the photo behind it, face turned inward. Then he did something he hadn't planned. He went to his room, pulled on a light jacket against the last shrug of evening cold, and slipped the envelope into his pocket. I'm going to school, he said, and the words surprised him. I want to leave this somewhere that makes sense. Vanessa reached for the keys and stopped, reading his face. This walk needed one set of footsteps. Text me when you get there, she said. And when you leave, the neighborhood held its usual choreography. Porch lights clicking on, a kid on a scooter dragging a foot to brake, someone grilling in the bite of early night. Darius crossed 2 streets and took the longer way, not to avoid attention, just to add a few more breaths between decision and delivery. He passed the barber shop. Jamal inside raised a pair of scissors and salute through the glass. He passed the river and didn't stop. At the school gates, the iron bars stood with their usual patience. Through them, he could see the quad half-lit, a janitor's cart parked like a quiet promise that things could be made clean, even when they never were. He expected to feel a movie version of triumph. What he felt was smaller and more honest, the steadiness of a choice that wasn't glamorous. Mr. Vu's room still glowed. A stack of essays was visible through the window, titles underlined twice in youthful certainty. Darius rested his hand on the gate's cold metal and thought about the words taped to Vu's board. Repair had been one of them. Repair, he realized, didn't ask him to fix someone else's house. It asked him to lock his own door. A voice came from the sidewalk behind him. You okay? Kiara, breath fogging in the chill. A backpack slung like she was always either leaving a meeting or headed to one. He turned, smiled, startled into gladness. Yeah, just choosing. She nodded toward the envelope in his pocket. Permission letter?
Pretty much.
You going to give it? She asked gently. He looked back at the building that had been a battlefield and a classroom and a stage. He thought of the museum, of a docent badge on a black blazer, of children under a halo of track lighting, hearing a story with his name inside it. He thought of his own future classrooms, college, work, whatever shape they took, and how he wanted to enter them without being a parable someone else used to make a point. No, he said. I'm going to say no. Kira's shoulders softened. That's a yes to yourself. He exhaled, the breath becoming a kind of prayer. Help me drop it at Kendall's. I want it in the record. And then I want tacos. They walked along the fence to the side door where Kendall's office light still burned. He was inside, sleeves rolled up, the new policy binder open like a hymn book. When he saw them, he stood, unlocked the door, and stepped onto the concrete landing, November air lifting the corner of a memo. Evening, he said. And his voice wasn't the starched principal voice. It was something like neighbor. Everything all right? Darius held out the envelope. It's from her. I wrote something on the back. He hesitated. It doesn't need a reply. Kendall didn't reach for it right away. Do you want it time-stamped? Filed? His question carried the humility of someone who had learned lately to ask before acting. Yes, Darius said. Record that I said no. Kendall nodded. I will. He took the envelope as if it were fragile. For what it's worth, I'm proud of the policy. I'm sorry for the path we made you walk to get it. Darius gave him a small nod that made room for both sentences. Me too. They left him there with the door half open and the binder splayed, the cold slipping past the threshold, like a guest who'd decided to stay. At the gate again, Kira touched his elbow once. You want me to go with you to the museum sometime? She asked. To not go inside? He laughed then, the sound turning the air lighter.
Yeah.
To not go inside. They stood a moment longer, until the cold made the choice for them. Kyra peeled off toward home. Darius remained, envelope gone from his pocket, but the choice sitting in his chest like something warm that would cool and stay. He took one last look at the school. The brick, the glass, the hallways that now held forms with better words, and reached into his other pocket. There was the comb, teeth wide, palm warm. He ran it once through his hair, not a fix, a ritual, and felt the scalp give beneath it, without flinching. Then he folded his hands, as if folding the letter again, though it was already out of his keeping. He stepped forward, toward the gates. The camera, if there had been one, would have pulled wide now, the frame lifting to catch him as a small figure moving down a familiar sidewalk, shoulders level, head unbowed, the metal bars of the school shrinking into lines on a map he was drawing for himself. He didn't know where it went yet. He knew only that it did not end at a desk drawer with scissors in it. He folded the choice inside him, the way you fold paper before you slide it through a slot, and as the shot widened, the school's windows glowing like constellations, the street lamps coming alive one by one, Darius Hill walked toward the gates. They called a child's hair a violation, and his dignity a distraction. then told us to be patient. If that felt like a cut you could hear, don't look away. Stories change when witnesses speak. Stand with the kid they tried to shrink. Stand with every kid who comes next. Type yes if you believe in justice.